Good evening, I'm Natalie Shepard.
And I'm Tan Trung. 5 former New Orleans police officers convicted in the deadly Danziger bridge shootings will now get new trials.
Today, a federal appeals court panel ruled in favor of the officers, citing the online commenting scandal involving the U.S. Attorney's Office. Tonight, Tanya Dahl has reaction from both sides.
Today's 2-1 appellate court decision boils down to the prosecutors working here at the federal courthouse and their online comments. It's a victory for the defendants, but a painful reminder for the plaintiffs of what happened that tragic day.
To think that would even consider this 10 years later is a shock.
On September 4th, 2005, just days after Hurricane Katrina, Rummel Madison's brother, Ronald, was shot and killed trying to cross the Danziger Bridge. Prosecutors say the 40-year-old mentally disabled man was gunned down by New Orleans police officers, along with 19-year-old James Brissett. 4 others were wounded by police gunfire that day.
A big disappointment to the family, our family, the other families that were involved, into the future with other families, knowing that, well, they could just kill us and get away with it.
The federal case would reveal a massive police cover-up. 4 cops were convicted of the shootings: Robert Gisavius, Kenneth Bowen, Anthony Villavaso, and Robert Falcon. Archie Kaufman was convicted in only the cover-up. All 5 men were sentenced, but an online scandal in the U.S. Attorney's Office involving federal prosecutors blogging about the case now means a possible new trial.
The shenanigans of the prosecutors from the start to the finish turned the concept of justice on its head. Everything they did ensured that these defendants would not receive a fair trial.
Attorney Tim Mesh represents Anthony Villavaso. He maintains his client is innocent and says he and the other officers deserve another shot in court.
These men have been in jail so long and they did not get a fair trial, and the least they could do is afford these men a fair trial. That's all we ask.
It's very unusual for defendants, particularly 5 defendants, in a group of defendants in this case, to get a new trial by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
A 3-judge panel at the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals issued its 2-1 opinion, siding with a previous ruling by U.S. District Judge Kurt Engelhardt, who overturned the officers' convictions, granting them a new trial. Tanya Dahl, Eyewitness News.
No word on whether or not U.S. Attorney Kenneth Poley will appeal today's ruling. We reached out to his office tonight and are still waiting to hear back.
Here's a timeline of events in the Danziger case. The shootings on the bridge on September 4th, 2005 left 2 dead and 4 wounded. A state grand jury then indicted 7 officers on murder and attempted murder charges. Those charges were tossed out in 2008, but the feds reopened the case a short time later. Then in July 2010, a federal grand jury indicted the officers and several others pled guilty. In 2011 came the guilty verdict, and the next year U.S. Attorney Jim Lenton and his top prosecutors stepped down amid scandal. Then in September 2013, Judge Kurt Engelhardt ordered a new trial, a decision the appeals court agreed with in today's ruling.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Friday, September 4th, 2015. So I have been told. Today, it is 10 years to the day of the Danziger Bridge shooting. That is just one of probably countless incidents of white terrorism that were visited upon thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of black people in connection with the levee failure, Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. The horrors of this case just keep coming. The families had to wait so long to get any sort of convictions. I can't even call it justice, but to get any sort of redress of the just incredible abuse and lies that these families suffered through, only to have these convictions tossed out and looking to get these officers a new trial. This happened repeatedly throughout a lot of the heinous and barbarous NOPD conduct in relation to the levee failure and Hurricane Katrina. The white suspected race soldier who killed Henry Glover admitted killing Henry Glover. His conviction was tossed out. He was reinstated and got back pay for the years that he was not able to carry a gun and a badge to go out and harass black New Orleans citizens, most likely. At any rate, it is the 10 years since Hurricane Katrina, and I do think it is one of the most important events that has taken place easily within the last half century. And I think with all of the celebrations and festivities that had been taking place, that one of the best things that we can do is to study this event, to try to learn as much as possible about this event, what happened to many of these black people, the stories in terms of how they were abused, in terms of trying to rebuild, in terms of trying to return to New Orleans, or just pick up the pieces to their lives. I think one of the most important things that we can do, learn how racism was manifested in all areas of people activity in connection to this event. In that vein, I wanted to take this book study session, not just to pick a book to kind of review what happened with the storm and the flooding and all that. I really wanted something to give a very comprehensive analysis of what has taken place over the last decade in all areas of people activity. So we can spend time with the charter school situation in New Orleans. We can spend time with public housing in New Orleans. We can spend time talking about the real looting that took place with Hurricane Katrina in terms of the billions of dollars that came into Louisiana and really the whole Gulf region, Mississippi as well, and how that money somehow, some way, just didn't end up in the pockets, bank accounts, hands of black people. Not that we should be surprised about that. So in that vein, we will be reading Gary Rivlin, Katrina, After the Flood. Now, this is a white man suspected racist who wrote the book, but a good chunk of his book is focused on the white supremacy racism that is intricately connected with everything that transpired from August 29th, 2005 to the present day. We will go ahead and get started. Definitely be alert to make sure that things are being discussed accurately. This is something that is recent history. This is not Ben Tillman and reading about kooky stuff that happened in the 19th century. We're talking about things that I am sure many people that listen to this program have very vivid memories and important connections to. So hopefully people will be alert. People will be motivated, encouraged to stick with it. It's a longer book, but hopefully we will learn a lot. And just looking forward to getting started with the text. Again, this is Mr. Gary Rivlin, Katrina, After the Flood, Context of White Supremacy. Katrina, After the Flood, by Gary Rivlin. Author's note. Water still covered much of New Orleans the first time I saw the city after Hurricane Katrina. Armed soldiers were stopping cars at roadblocks set up on the perimeter of the metro area. I had hitched a ride with a Republican state senator anxious to get to her flooded home and her then husband. My press credentials got us through one checkpoint. Her legislative ID convinced the National Guard to allow us to pass through another. The highway was empty when, once inside the city limits, we hit an elevated stretch of road offering a panoramic view. This was the flooded city the world was seeing on television, but even there on the highway it still seemed unreal, like a special effect ordered up by Steven Spielberg. 80% of the city lay underwater, more than 110,000 homes, and another 20,000 businesses. A week earlier, I had been sitting in the San Francisco bureau of the New York Times writing about Google, Facebook, and Silicon Valley's next crop of underage billionaires. My New Orleans was the New Orleans of tourists. Bourbon Street, Mardi Gras, the Jazz and Heritage Festival, Po' Boys. I had no connection to anyone living there, but an all-hands mentality prevailed at the Times, given a disaster that displaced more than 1 million people. My editor asked if I could help out, and a few days later I was picking up car keys at a rental center at the Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport, around an hour north and west of New Orleans. My new office was whatever patch of free space I could find at a place my colleagues had already dubbed the Plantation, a white-columned antebellum house in Baton Rouge normally rented out for parties that the Times had transformed into a makeshift newsroom and barracks. We'd take turns in New Orleans sleeping in a trio of rooms the paper had booked at the Sheraton there, which, as one of the few functioning hotels in the center of town, also served as the city's main meeting place. Most everyone around me was looking backward in those earliest weeks after Katrina. Teams of scientists were exploring how and why the levees around New Orleans had failed on the morning of Monday, August 29, 2005, when Katrina struck the Louisiana coast. Medical examiners around the region still had no idea what the final death count might be. There were reports of euthanized patients inside a New Orleans hospital. 36 elderly patients had supposedly been left to die at a nursing home. Reporters were assigned to each of those topics, but most were focused on the botched rescue which had played out live on television. Thousands waited helplessly on elevated sections of the interstate, hungry and thirsty and looking skyward for the help that was not coming. It took the government 4 days to send the buses needed to rescue the 25,000 people stranded inside the Superdome. Another 24 hours passed before buses were dispatched to pick up people at the Ernest N. Morial Convention Center, where another 20,000 had taken refuge. The most powerful nation on earth had failed its citizens so miserably. Blame needed to be assigned. Yet even before getting on that plane to Baton Rouge, my instincts had me looking forward to the mess ahead. Eventually, the flood waters would recede. How would New Orleans go about the complicated task of rebuilding? The majority of the city's police and fire stations had flooded. So too had most of the city's schools. Flooding had destroyed the city's electrical system and disabled its sewer and water systems. Even the weight of all the water on the streets proved catastrophic, cracking gas lines and underground pipes and, in some cases, the roadways themselves. Most of the city's buses had been destroyed along with dozens of its streetcars. Meanwhile, powerful voices in Washington were saying the city shouldn't be rebuilt, that a low-lying delta was no place or a city except if there wasn't a New Orleans at the mouth of the Mississippi to serve as a port of entry to the 31 states and 2 Canadian provinces that are part of the Mississippi River Valley. They'd have to build a city there given its geographic significance. The storm meant New Orleans would be without most of its revenues. All those shuttered businesses represented millions in lost sales tax revenues each month. Collecting property taxes, the city's second largest source of revenue, seemed unrealistic in a city including most of its planning department. New Orleans had long been one of the country's poorest and most violent cities. The Orleans parish schools had been through 8 superintendents in 7 years, and off and on, New Orleans Police Department, NOPD, had been among the country's most notorious, and racial tensions were never far from the surface in New Orleans. Our celebratory culture and accepting nature conceals a city with a troubled soul. Silas Lee, a well-liked black commentator, had written 2 years before Katrina. For 2 decades, Lee, a pollster with a PhD in urban policy, had been studying the socioeconomic makeup of the city. During that time, the portion of black New Orleans earning a high school or college degree had dramatically increased, yet the income gap between black and white had widened. Behind the mask, Lee wrote, resides a divided city. My temporary posting became more permanent when, around 1 month after Katrina, I was assigned to the storm team assembled to handle the paper's coverage of Katrina. My center of gravity shifted from the plantation to the Sheraton in New Orleans, where my neighbors included the president of the city council and other elected officials who had lost their homes in Katrina. New Orleans then felt more small town than big city, home to maybe 20,000 people, where it wasn't uncommon to run into the mayor several times a week. Any journalism endeavor has an element of luck. I wasn't in Baton Rouge 12 hours when I sat across the desk from Louisiana Lieutenant Governor Mitch Landrieu, who would play a central role in the story I tell here. That night, I racked up a bar bill of nearly $200 at a restaurant popular among political insiders collecting names and cell phone numbers, the only digits that would count for months in a city of shuttered businesses and flooded homes. That's how I was able to reach the personal friend of George W. Bush, who served as Karl Rove's eyes and ears in New Orleans, and also Alden McDonald, a savvy, well-connected black banker whom the mayor would invite to shape the rebuilding plan as a member of the Bring New Orleans Back Commission. Bring a map of New Orleans was McDonald's only precondition when he agreed to meet with me 11 days after Katrina. The talk then was of an equal opportunity storm that had hit black and white alike, but he was having none of it. Sitting in the makeshift office his people had set up for him in the back of a bank branch in Baton Rouge, he drew a line down the middle of the map. He pointed to the western half of New Orleans. "That's the New Orleans you know," he said. "The French Quarter, the Superdome, the Warehouse District, the Garden District, St. Charles Avenue." Then he pointed to the eastern half of the map. "That's where he lived," McDonald said, "and also most of his customers. Where you saw water up to the rooftops," he said, "that's where most of the city's black people lived." Prologue. Water rising. Overtime pay was never enough. The bosses running the city's transit agency needed to offer more than money to convince the bus drivers, streetcar operators, mechanics, and others they needed to stay in town through a big storm. So in August 2005, with a hurricane named Katrina bearing down on New Orleans, they did as they had in the past ahead of previous scares. They opened up the agency's headquarters, a 3-story brick fortress on Canal Street on the edge of the city's central business district. To get the volunteers we needed, we'd allowed them to bring their spouses, their children, grandmothers, grandfathers, girlfriends, nieces, nephews, whoever, said Bill DeVille, then the general manager of the New Orleans Regional Transit Authority. The A. Philip Randolph Building, what RTA employees called the Canal Street Barn, or simply the Barn, was hardly the Hilton. People slept on air mattresses and needed to bring their own food, but the barn was also a veritable fort stocked with military food rations and water and with its own backup generator. Most important, it was in a part of the town that everyone knew never flooded. People really want to be together in a protected facility, DeVille said. Around the region, the traffic on the highways out of town ahead of Katrina was heaviest on Sunday. The storm wouldn't hit New Orleans until early on Monday morning, yet the city's bus drivers and others needed to work on Sunday, picking up people at evacuation centers around the city and dropping them off at the Superdome. Thus, on Saturday, the RTA employees, their families, and their friends started showing up at the barn, dragging with them their suitcases and carrying coolers and the occasional large silver pot heavy with gumbo. By Sunday night, somewhere around 300 people were taking refuge there. The group, around 90% black, included grandparents and a couple of babies. Only around 1/3 worked for the RTA. People plugged in hot plates to heat up their food and shared the flasks and bottles they had brought with them. By 10 p.m., the winds sounded like a jet engine roaring. By midnight, the pounding rain echoed through the building. Why not a party when there was nothing to do except wait. Monday. Gerald Robichaud, the RTA's Deputy General Manager for Operations, was up early Monday morning. He saw water in the streets and immediately regretted his decision to leave the agency's 3 big dump trucks parked at the Uptown facility a few miles away, along with big rigs they use to tow disabled buses. These trucks, with tires as tall as the average size man, Robichaud realized, might prove to be their chariots of escape if the water in the streets kept rising. Robichaud ordered a small crew to take the single high-wheeled vehicle they had at the Canal Street barn and pick up the other rigs on Napoleon Avenue. Robichaud also asked Wilford Eddington to join them. Eddington was a member of the New Orleans Police Department and part of the RTA's Transit Police Unit. The wind was still blowing at around 50 miles per hour when they pulled out of the barn at around 10 a.m. Eddington remembered a blue Chevy parked at the Chevron station a block away. The water, maybe curb high, reached the bottom of the Chevy's hubcaps. The water was halfway up the car's windows when they returned 90 minutes later. Back at the barn, the men told Robichaud what they had seen. They had headed west and south of downtown, expecting to see at least some flooding in Uptown, which often gets an inch or two of water after a hard rain. But Uptown was dry. Only closer to their building had they hit any real flooding. Needing to see for himself, Robichaud called out the names of a few of his top people and jumped into one of the big trucks. Bill DeVille decided to join his number 2 and almost immediately regretted his decision. The 58-year-old general manager was taking medicine for a bad heart. He took another pill to manage his high blood pressure. Just getting to the rig meant walking through foul, brackish water up past his knees. Only once it was too late did DeVille remember a cut on his leg. Robichaud was anxious to see the large facility the RTA operated in the eastern part of the city in New Orleans East. With water starting to leak into the ground floor of the Canal Street barn, that might need to serve as their temporary base for running the city's transit agency. Once on the interstate, Robichaud realized he had bigger problems than figuring out what day they might restart bus and streetcar service. Water was in every direction, sometimes up to the eaves of one-story homes. The I-10 became impassable after a couple of miles driving, forcing them to turn back. At some point on Monday, the toilets stopped working. No small concern in a building housing around 300 people. Landlines weren't working and cell phone coverage was spotty. They weren't completely cut off, however. The police scanner was still working, which is how they learned about the levee breaches. Bill DeVille called everyone together late Monday afternoon to relay the bad news. He reminded them of dozens of pumping stations the city operated around town and how effectively these miracle machines soaked up excess water. It will probably take another day or so for the water to subside, he said. Tuesday. Gerald Robichaud and several supervisors were up early on Tuesday making rounds. So much water had gotten inside the building overnight that the emergency generator was submerged, rendering it useless. They were low on food and almost out of water. Walking around the building, they could feel the rising panic. Older people were running low on medicines. Mothers needed clean diapers. Robichaud went looking for his boss. DeVille had gone straight to his office after delivering the bad news about the city's broken levees. He had lain down on the couch, but who could sleep in the stupefying heat and with his cut leg feeling as if it were on fire? In the middle of the night, DeVille grabbed a flashlight and headed to his car parked in the employee parking lot. He turned on the engine, set the air conditioner to high, and fell asleep. Robichaud rapped on the door of DeVille's car. DeVille's first feeling was confusion, then shame. It had been dark when he'd closed his eyes, but he was squinting against the brightness. How long had he been asleep? He asked himself groggily. 3 hours? 4 hours? We need to leave, Robichaud told him. He gave DeVille a grim update, and then laid out the plan Robichaud and a few others had hatched. "We'll give people a choice," Robichaud said. They were maybe a dozen blocks from an entrance ramp to an elevated portion of the I-10. They could wade or swim to that ramp. They knew from listening to the radio and police scanners that the streets were dry on the other side of the Mississippi River. Those who felt up to it could walk a few miles on the elevated I-10 to the Crescent City Connection, the bridge that took traffic over the Mississippi River to the West Bank. With some luck, they could contact the drivers of the big coaches they had parked in Laplace, a town halfway between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, and arrange to be picked up at the park and ride commuter lot the RTA operated on the West Bank. Those who did not feel up to the long walk could remain in the barn while a small scouting party searched for boats to ferry them to safety. A meeting was held on the roof parking lot later that morning. DeVille asked Robichaud to explain his idea, but this no-nonsense manager, who was so adept at making the buses run more or less on time, wasn't necessarily the best messenger in the midst of a crisis. Robichaud admitted they had no idea how deep the water was to the ramp. He then told the group to split into two. He asked those who could swim to gather on the side of the roof and those who couldn't on the other. "They're leaving us to drown," some of the non-swimmers called out. DeVille stepped up on the back of a pickup truck. "No one is leaving anyone behind," he assured them. They had air mattresses, he said. They would float people who couldn't swim. He also made a promise: "I'll stay with anyone who doesn't feel up to the walk." Afterward, people patted him on the back for his bravery, but he felt like a fraud. "I was scared to death," DeVille confessed. "People thought I was a hero for volunteering to stay behind, but I can't swim. Plus, there was no way I was stepping another foot in that water." While still standing on the flatbed, DeVille told the crowd of a conversation he had had that morning with someone in the governor's office. He'd promised to send helicopters as soon as any were available. Maybe those who remained at the barn would be the first ones rescued. A little past noon on Tuesday, August 30th, 2005, the first RTA employees dropped themselves into the dark, murky waters that were chest high on a 6-foot man. Around 2/3 of their group, 200 people, chose to walk rather than remain. Children were hoisted on air mattresses, along with most everyone standing under maybe 5 feet 5 inches tall. Those tall enough to walk sloshed through the smelly, oily water, guiding the others on the makeshift rafts. Sharon Paul, a 50-year-old RTA dispatcher, was a diabetic who had already gone more than 24 hours without her insulin. But Paul was a strong swimmer. She helped a pregnant woman heft herself onto an air mattress along with a pair of toddlers. Paul then tied a rope around her waist and towed the three of them. "I'm done," she said, collapsing once they reached the elevated highway. She'd need to walk another 6 miles to make the park and ride on the West Bank. Some had thought they were strong enough to make it the half-mile to the interstate, but were not. Others froze in place. Reuben Stevens, an NOPD lieutenant who headed up the RTA's police unit, helped with the stragglers. "People were petrified of the water," Stevens said. Wilford Eddington was already sitting on top of the interstate with his boots off when Robichaud asked him and another officer to help coax people to the interstate. He laced up his boots and headed down the ramp and into the muck. "Our job was to make sure that we got everybody to that bridge," Eddington said. Staying together was a challenge. They had imagined walking as a single group toward the twin cantilevered bridges looming a couple of miles away. Reuben Stevens, the police lieutenant, ordered Eddington to the front of the line. Stevens and several other officers retreated to the back of the group to wrangle any strays. People passed the Superdome, standing like a giant spaceship next to the highway, and stared. Some in their contingent had been at the dome as recently as Sunday, where orderly lines of people were waiting to be patted down, people were being checked for weapons before they were admitted to this shelter of last resort. Now thick crowds of people milled everywhere, while nearby the National Guardsmen stood holding weapons. Pieces of the Superdome's roof had peeled off. The giant Hyatt Regency next door, where the mayor and his top people were, looked worse. Almost every window on the northern face of the hotel was shattered. They passed clots of 5 or 10 people, but no other contingent was nearly as large as theirs, and none seemed to be walking with the same purpose. The temperature was in the 90s and the humidity high. From the interstate, they had an expansive view of the watery New Orleans, a perfect vantage point for contemplating a drowned-out home. A torpor took over all but the strongest among them, but they kept walking. The bridge ahead led to Algiers, the New Orleans neighborhood on the other side of the Mississippi. Only later did they appreciate that it was also the route to white flight suburbs such as Gretna, the first town they would reach once they had crossed the Crescent City connection. At least one of them was in a wheelchair, and their ranks included grandmothers, toddlers, and several police officers. None seemed to be thinking about what it meant that theirs was an almost all-black group heading into a predominantly white community. A bus driver named Malcolm Butler and his wife Dorothy were among the first to notice the blockade. Initially, Malcolm Butler thought his eyes were playing tricks on him in the hot midday sun. Butler was set to retire after 33 years on the job on August 31st, the next day. Their home in New Orleans East had almost certainly flooded, and then there were the fresh horrors of their walk from the Canal Street barn to the interstate. Butler, who is not tall, had walked through greasy water up to his neck, his nose and chin pointed upward, guiding Dorothy, who clung to an air mattress. They had probably been on the interstate for less than an hour, enough so that their clothes had dried out, even if the stink of the water remained. When Butler stopped and asked Dorothy if she was seeing what he was, a pair of police officers brandishing weapons blocking their passage, they was standing up there with their automobiles blocking the bridge with shotguns and M16s and told us we couldn't go no further, Butler recalled. Wilfred Eddington, the police officer assigned to walk point as they headed towards the West Bank, figured he was around 1,000 yards from the foot of the bridge when he saw the 2 police cars parked nose to nose, forming a wedge to block their passage. Eventually, he heard them yelling, "Go back! Go back! Get off the bridge!" He noticed their black uniforms. They were members of the small force responsible for policing the bridge. Eddington was dressed in jeans but wearing a dark t-shirt stamped with the word police in large letters. He wore a holstered gun on his belt. He asked the others to slow down while he approached his counterparts. The smaller of the 2 bridge cops, a young black woman, didn't seem to care what it said on Eddington's shirt. The closer he got, the louder she seemed to scream. She was out of control, Eddington said. She was irate. "You gotta bring it down a few notches," Eddington said, looking at the female officer. "You're now at around 10. We need you to bring it down to 3. He was a cop with 2 decades on the job counseling a less experienced officer. But she remained belligerent, Eddington said. Reuben Stevens, the police lieutenant, jogged up from the back of their ranks. He introduced himself and explained that a group of city workers on duty at the time of the storm had gotten trapped by the flooding. They were only trying to reach their facility in Algiers, where some buses would be picking them up. "You're not crossing my damn bridge," the female officer responded. "You better get your rank," Stevens snapped. "Pedestrians are not permitted on the bridge at any time," she countered, as if this was any other Tuesday. She was hollering. "I lost my house. I lost everything," Wilfred Eddington said, but she was also adamant. "You all ain't going nowhere," she repeated. At the back of the line, Sharon Paul, the diabetic dispatcher, looked uncomprehendingly at the police cruisers parked to block their way until someone told her, "Police say we can't cross." Don't they know we've got water where we come from? A supervisor for the bridge police arrived at the scene. So did Gerald Robichaud, who had been preoccupied tending to those at the back of the line needing help. A stalemate lasting between 30 and 60 minutes ended when several suburban line commuter buses arrived to pick them up at the foot of the bridge. For the moment, everything seemed a crazy misunderstanding, and the RTA people boarded the buses. Sitting at the front of the bus, Lieutenant Stevens assumed they were heading to the RTA's park and ride in Algiers. The coaches had instead brought them to the bus depot in suburban Gretna. Stevens heard the Gretna police officers before he saw them. "Don't get off that bus," they barked. "Don't get off that damn bus." Stevens stepped down the stairs thinking he could talk to them cop to cop. "I'm a police lieutenant," he tried to say, but they were yelling too loud to hear him. Each pointed a weapon at him. "Where the fuck y'all think you're going with all these people? Who the fuck told y'all to bring these people here? Y'all need to get the hell out of here." Stevens had grown up in the Desire Housing Project in New Orleans' Upper Ninth Ward. He had served in the Army and worn a police uniform for more than 2 decades. For the last 5 years, that uniform had been dressed with a lieutenant's star. He had probably 5 or 6 feet of water sitting in the modest place he owned in New Orleans East, a single-story ranch home which guaranteed that most everything he owned had been ruined. "I ain't going nowhere," Lieutenant Stevens said. He had a gun strapped to his belt and told himself he was ready to use it, if necessary. "I feared one of them might start shooting," Stevens said, "and then you'd have a massacre." People walked off the bus despite the threats. Gail Davis, a 53-year-old grandmother whose husband, Woodrow, worked for the RTA, was on that first bus with her daughter and 3 grandchildren. Davis found herself staring at guns as she got off the bus. "They was putting them in our faces and saying, 'If you move, if you breathe, we're going to shoot you,'" Davis said. "I'm trying to hold on to my grandchildren because they was 9, 10, 11 years old." Mary Ann Ruth, a 49-year-old cashier at the Boomtown Casino just outside New Orleans, her fiancé was a driver for the RTA, was also on that first bus. She, too, was a grandmother, there with her fiancé's 9-year-old son and a 2-year-old granddaughter. "We were hungry. We was wet after walking in that nasty water," Ruth said. "We wasn't trying to harm nobody. They had their guns cocked. They say, 'If they move, shoot 'em.'" The second and third buses pulled up, and they, too, disgorged their passengers there at the Gretna bus terminal. There, on this large patch of sidewalk under a highway overpass, the police pointed shotguns and other long guns, yelling, "Motherfucker this and motherfucker that." "On her bus," said Sharon Paul, the diabetic, people felt a sense of relief when out the window they saw all the police. "We really thought they was coming to assist us," Paul said. "And why not? Gretna, a town of 18,000 whose official motto is small city, big heart, had lost the electricity but still had plenty of food and water on stock. Its roads were passable, providing people with a path to safety." Paul said she heard one cop yell, "Get on the curb now or we're gonna shoot." But she couldn't take the command seriously. "They cocked their guns," Paul said, and then everybody paid attention. "They was being ugly and all rough and rude with us," Paul said, "and it ain't like we was throwed away people. We was working class people trying to get where we had to go." Gretna police officer Dwight Dorsey was on patrol when he heard a staticky message over the single emergency channel available to all first responders in the area. It was a call for assistance over the radio, saying they had a large group of subjects loitering, Dorsey said. Dorsey says 6 to 8 police cars were at the Gretna bus terminal that afternoon. Luis Alvarez, another cop on the scene, said there were 5 patrol cars, but allowed that the number might have been higher. Mary Ann Ruth, the casino cashier, said at least 10 cops were watching over their clutch of grandmothers, children, and civil service lifers. Wilford Eddington, the longtime NOPD cop, put the number of officers who semicircled around us at between 11 and 15. Chris Roberts also responded to the call for reinforcements. Roberts was a member of the Gretna City Council, not a sworn peace officer, but he later described himself as eager to help protect his town from looters and other bad elements from New Orleans. He was this little, short, white guy getting into people's faces, Brandon Mason, an RTA supervisor, said. He's yelling at people, "This is my city," telling us how it's martial law and we have no business being in his city. Wilford Eddington was the first person Roberts encountered at the scene. The police officer had removed himself from the group and was sitting on the curb smoking a cigar he had secreted away. "Who in the hell ordered this?" Eddington heard the man's high-pitched, loud voice before he saw him. "Who said these people could get off here?" Eddington turned and saw a short white man walking his way, jabbing his finger at him. I'm like, "Dude, what are you talking about? I'm just sitting smoking a cigar." "I want to know right now who ordered this." "Who ordered what?" Eddington stood up. He towered over Roberts. "Who told you to bring these people over here under this bridge?" Eddington asked who was asking, and Roberts identified himself. "Okay, Chris Roberts of the Gretna City Council, you have a few seconds to back off and just get out of my face." "I'm not going anywhere." "Get the hell out of my face," Eddington yelled, then heard the unmistakable crack of someone racking a shotgun. A Gretna officer apparently did not like the manner in which this black cop from New Orleans was talking to an elected official. Roberts kept jabbering at him. He was this little gnat, Eddington said of the councilman, a pain in the ass. But Eddington was no longer listening. I was tunnel vision, looking at this one particular police officer. He stomped over to confront the cop holding the shotgun. As I'm walking to him, I'm breaking leather. Eddington said, "I'm coming out." He had a police revolver on his right hip, and he was unholstering his weapon. Ronnie Harris, the longtime Gretna mayor, arrived and demanded to know who was in charge. All eyes turned to Harris and also to Gerald Robichaud, who was talking on a cell phone, seeing if he could find any buses and drivers to get them out of there. Robichaud had run the transit agency on this side of the bridge before taking the number 2 job at the RTA. He and Harris knew one another. If Harris had not shown up when he did, Lieutenant Stevens said, God only knows where it would have went. The mayor promised a few porta potties and ordered someone to get some water for their guests. Stevens ordered Eddington to the other side of their group to put distance between him and the shotgun-wielding Gretna cop. The Gretna police still didn't holster their guns. "We had weapons pointed at us the entire time," Lieutenant Stevens said. The violation of the Blue Brotherhood Code seemed to aggravate Stevens more than anything else. "I would never have treated a fellow police officer the way they treated us," he said. "We felt like hostages." Some part of the RTA contingent refused water when it was offered, including Brandon Mason, the RTA supervisor, and Cindy Creighton, Gerald Robichaud's executive assistant. For Creighton, the declined water was her small protest over how they were treated. Mr. Robichaud was trying to explain that we were there doing a job and helping the city of New Orleans, not folks coming over to loot, she said. Yet they were treated as nothing but a mostly black group invading a predominantly white enclave. A pair of older black women, each in a wheelchair, arrived not long after the others. The women had been rescued by boat from the Canal Street barn and transported across the bridge on the back of a flatbed liberated from the agency's Napoleon Avenue facility. With no way to secure the wheelchairs on the flatbed, a pair of RTA employees gripped the legs of the chair with all their might, including Charlie Veal, the 65-year-old assistant director for rail operations. "Nobody off," the police yelled at them when they arrived in Gretna. "Nobody gets off this truck." Rather than risk another confrontation, the driver was told to drop everybody off at the RTA's park and ride in Algiers, which had been their original destination. After a couple of hours of forced detention for the RTA contingent, several RTA coaches, between 3 and 5, depending on who is telling the story, pulled up at the Gretna bus depot. They stopped by the park and ride to pick up anyone who had ended up there. Their caravan then headed to Baton Rouge. A few, including Sharon Paul, would be dropped off at a hospital, but most were brought to an evacuation center. There, they were reunited with many of those rescued from the Canal Street barn by the boats Bill DeVille and his people had scavenged up. The group of them slept on canvas cots that week in a huge auditorium crowded with hundreds of other evacuees. But they also had access to a bathroom when they needed it. Their shelter had electricity and plenty of food and water. They were among the lucky ones. The Gretna police brass split their force into two. Those on the early shift began work at 7 a.m. Those on the late shift took over at 7 p.m. An ex-Marine named Scott Vinson, a sergeant on the late shift, was responsible for patrolling that first exit ramp people would reach on the West Bank side of the bridge. For anyone in the vicinity of the New Orleans Central Business District, the Crescent City Connection, a pair of steel bridges stretching across the Mississippi, the 5th longest bridges of their type in the world, pointed the way toward freedom. Vinson's job was to see that people didn't walk aimlessly through Gretna in search of an escape route. Tuesday night had been quiet at the bottom of the exit, but all Wednesday evening and into the night, a steady procession of people in clusters of 2s and 3s and 5s walked down the ramp. Vinson stationed 2 patrolmen at the bottom of the highway. They lined people up and kept order while he used his radio to scrounge up buses, anything to transport people to an evacuation point. He did the same shortly after daybreak on Thursday when a second wave of evacuees, Vinson said, came trudging over the bridge. Vinson worked past the end of his shift and into early afternoon till that last person was loaded on a bus. A tired Vinson arrived at the Gretna police station where he bunked that week, exhausted but feeling good about what he and his people had accomplished. The 3 of us were able to help in excess of 1,000 people, closer to 1,500, Vinson said. Thursday. It was past 1 a.m. when Raymond Blanco, the husband of Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco, showed in Gretna. He arrived with a state legislator and a Louisiana trooper. "We was just killing time, really," Blanco said. They were in the area to deliver medical supplies and waiting for a boat that would bring them to a flooded area south of the city. With nothing else to do, Blanco, who liked to call himself the first guy, paid a courtesy call on Gretna's mayor, Ronnie Harris, who Blanco had known since Harris was a teenager. It was easy to find Harris. The police station was about the only building in town with lights. By all appearances, they were in control of their situation, Blanco said. He remembered their giving him something to eat and recalled talk of all the people walking across the bridge. He told them FEMA was promising buses and that his wife, the governor, was trying to secure others from around the state. None of them, Blanco said, not the mayor, not the police chief, or anyone else in the Gretna police station that night, brought up the idea of a bridge blockade. The boat that was supposed to give Blanco and his entourage a ride never materialized. A frustrated first guy slumped in the back seat of the car that took him home to Baton Rouge that morning. On either side of the interstate were parked dozens of buses, all of them idle. The drivers, he would learn when he got back to the state capitol, had been scared off by reports of gunfire and looting out of New Orleans. With all the drama in the media, the bus driver said, "Here are the keys. You can use the bus, but I'm not going in there," Kathleen Blanco said. Between the Superdome, Convention Center, and people stuck up on the highway, tens of thousands of people needed to be rescued. Raymond Blanco didn't give his visit to Gretna another thought until he heard that this small town of 18,000 had shut down a state-run bridge, the main escape route out of New Orleans. Charles Whitmer, Gretna's deputy police chief, expected to see mobs when he drove up on the bridge at 8:30 a.m. on Thursday. Instead, he saw smaller groups of 1, 2, 3 here and there, with 2 or 3 behind them. Sporadic. But he also told his boss, Chief Arthur Lawson, that he could see people just continuously as far as I can see into New Orleans. That was enough for Lawson. He ordered his number 2 to track down the chief of the bridge police. "Tell him we need to talk about the pedestrian situation on the bridge," Chief Lawson instructed. Chief Lawson and several of his people were at the meeting on Thursday morning where they decided to shut down the Crescent City connection. The head of the bridge police was there. The meeting was in his office inside the small administrative building located on the West Bank side of the bridge. That was technically Orleans Parish, yet no one on their side of the bridge even tried to contact their counterparts in New Orleans. The radios were out, Whitmer explained. The phones were out. Yet somehow their group included a deputy representing the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. NOPD had set up an impromptu headquarters at the foot of Canal Street, just on the other side of the bridge under the entrance to the Harrah's Casino, as anyone listening to a police scanner or even CNN would know, including New Orleans in their multi-jurisdictional decision would have required just a 10-minute drive across the river to extend an invitation. The chief of the bridge police, Michael Helmsetter, when asked to explain his rationale for voting to shut down the Crescent City connection, said, "I guess to protect the pedestrians that were crossing." Chief Lawson cited any number of explanations for his decision. He needed to think about his men, he said, who were on their 4th or 5th day working 12-hour shifts. The city had ample food and drink, but not if they had to share it with every person who crossed its city limits. "We aided as long as we could," Lawson said. No notes were taken during the meeting, but by all accounts, there wasn't much dissension. Mainly, the talk was about the logistics of shutting down the bridge. The bridge police would block anyone already on the interstate from walking toward Gretna. Jefferson Parish posted several deputies at a ramp near the Superdome, while Gretna took responsibility for blocking the entrance ramp at Chapatoulas Street, also on the New Orleans side of the bridge and a short walk from the Convention Center. At around 10:30 a.m. on Thursday, September 1st, 2005, with the thermometer near 90 degrees on a day that promised to be as hot and humid as the one before, the first 3 Gretna patrol officers took their post at the top of the Chapatoulas ramp. The Crescent City connection was now closed to any pedestrian seeking a way out of New Orleans. Kathleen Blanco was at the state's Emergency Operations Center in Baton Rouge when she learned about the bridge closing. The governor was furious. They had no authority to do what they did, Blanco said. The Crescent City connection fell under the jurisdiction of Louisiana's Department of Transportation. Blocking pedestrian traffic from crossing the bridge would have been her call and a decision she would not have made. Nothing needed to be shut down, Blanco said. It was totally unnecessary and a horrible reaction based on fear. Ray Nagin might have been even angrier than Blanco if he knew what was happening. On Thursday morning, Nagin was angry at Blanco, not anyone in Gretna. The governor had been promising buses for at least 2 days, yet now he was hearing reports of buses picking up people on the roadways before they even reached the city. Reports came as well of buses skipping past the city to pick up people in the suburbs. In protest, Nagin called for a freedom march across the Crescent City connection. Tap out a press statement on your BlackBerry, he instructed Sally Foreman, his communications director. We said, if you want to walk across the Crescent City connection, there's buses coming. You may be able to find some relief, the mayor wrote in a self-published memoir based on those few weeks when he was the most famous mayor in America. He also instructed his police chief to spread word among officers working near the convention center. The buses are just on the opposite side of the bridge. Kevin Fernandez, Gordon McCraw, and Lawrence Vaughn were the first Gretna officers assigned to the Tchoupitoulas entrance ramp. Their orders had been minimal. You're to stop people, the sergeant said. James Price had told them and tell them they weren't going to be allowed to cross. On their own, the three decided not to allow through even pedestrians carrying an ID showing they lived on the West Bank. Each carried a department-issued Glock 45 and a pump-action shotgun. Sergeant Price had not instructed his men to use the shotguns, but then he had not forbidden them from using them either. The police felt for the people they couldn't let pass. I would have tried to get out too, Kevin Fernandez said. Instead, they repeated the same few things. There was no food or water for them on the other side of the bridge. There was also no way out. We kept explaining, Officer Fernandez said, that there were buses going into Orleans Parish to evacuate them, that if they would wait, they'd shortly be evacuated. Lawrence Vaughn, who was black, suggested that people find a ride across the bridge. People were not permitted to walk to the West Bank, Vaughn said, but I told them that they were welcome to use any other means of conveyance, a vehicle. The three Gretna cops had been stopping people for around 2 hours when the mood, Officer Vaughn said, turned a little more hostile. Somewhere around 800 to 1,000 people were gathered by the Tchoupitoulas on ramp on a hideously hot day that again saw temperatures in the 90s. It fell on him, Vaughn decided, as the only African American to calm people down. Instead, Vaughn's race gave people a focus for their frustrations. People in the crowd called Vaughn an Uncle Tom. He was a traitor. A black man holding a child around 2 years old was particularly cruel. Why was he doing the white man's business, he asked Vaughn, when so many of his own were in need? Where are we supposed to go? The man with the small child pleaded. Sit tight, Officer McGraw advised people. The buses were on their way. Others in the crowd yelled that they heard the opposite from NOPD. The heckler handed off his child, as Vaughn told it. The one doing all the talking says, "We'll bum rush them 2 white boys and jump this nigger here. We can get across this bridge." At that point, Vaughn had worn a badge for more than 20 years, including a stint in the military police in the U.S. Army. There was too many of them against the 3 of us, he said. Scared, he pointed his shotgun over the water and fired off a round to get their attention. "You Uncle Tom," the man who had been doing most of the talking said. "Yes, sir." "You stupid fucking nigger." "Yes, sir." "I'm going to whip your fool ass." "Yes, sir, but you're not coming across that bridge." The thing that disappointed us a great deal were the canceled flights. Kathleen Blanco told CNN a few days after Katrina. Continental Airlines had heroically continued to fly people out of New Orleans through 3:30 p.m. on Sunday, but Delta discontinued its passenger air service out of New Orleans at just after midnight on Saturday. A lot of people got stranded like that, Blanco said. It fell to the city's hotels to care for those who couldn't get out of New Orleans ahead of the storm. Plenty of lodgings booted lingering guests on Monday or Tuesday, pointing the way to the Superdome or the Convention Center before shuttering their doors. The staff of the Hotel Montleone, in contrast, acted valiantly in those first days after the storm. This stately building in the heart of the French Quarter housed and fed around 500 people, a group. By Thursday, though, the hotel was running out of water and food and also the fuel needed to operate its generator. Here are some maps management told people. Go to the Convention Center. There'll be buses for you there. Larry Bradshaw and Lori Beth Slonsky of San Francisco were among those who had gotten stuck at the Montleone. They were in New Orleans for a conference of EMS, Emergency Medical Services workers, of all things, and were among those unable to catch a flight out of town ahead of Katrina. Now they were part of a group of around 200, the majority tourists, on the streets of New Orleans, left to fend for themselves. The group ran into National Guardsmen a few streets from the Montleone. They were no longer letting people inside the convention center, the soldiers told them, but didn't have an answer when people asked where they should go. The guards told us that this was our problem, and no, they didn't have extra water to give us. Bradshaw and Slonsky wrote in an article about their experience published in the Socialist Worker 11 days after Katrina. A few blocks later, they came across the impromptu command center the New Orleans police had set up in front of Harrah's. No one there could tell them where they were supposed to go, so as a group, they decided they would camp out across the street from Harrah's. By that time, their group numbered around 300. Maybe their size would make them impossible to ignore. Their gambit worked. After a fashion, a police commander crossed the street to talk with them. Walk across the bridge, he advised. I swear to you that the buses are there, he supposedly told them. With great excitement and hope, Bradshaw and Slonsky wrote they headed toward the bridge. They passed by the convention center, where their determination to find a way out of New Orleans must have been infectious. Quickly, our numbers doubled and doubled again, the couple wrote. Babies in strollers now joined us, as did people using crutches, elderly clasping walkers, and other people in wheelchairs. A torrential downpour drenched the lot of them, but the group, now a majority black, kept walking. Their group made it onto the highway, but were stopped before they reached the bridge by a barricade of police cruisers and armed sheriffs, according to Bradshaw and Slonsky. The deputies began firing their weapons over our heads. Most of their group ran, but Bradshaw and Slonsky, among others, tried talking to the deputies. They responded that the West Bank was not going to become New Orleans and there would be no Superdomes in their city, the couple wrote. Bradshaw, Slonsky, and a small band of others set up camp on the roadway not far from where they had been turned away. An elevated highway seemed safer than the streets. From their perch, they watched others attempt to cross the bridge. Sometimes the police deterred would-be crossers with shouts. Other times they used gunfire to turn people around. Either way, no one was walking across that bridge. Oliver Thomas, president of the New Orleans City Council, noticed the blockade after a long day in and out of the water on a rescue boat. I had sores on my feet for 2 months, he said. Let's talk basic human rights, Thomas said. You've got these people on the governor's bridge stopping Louisiana citizens from crossing the bridge. Old people, children, people peacefully walking through a route literally that's the only way out of a city covered by water. By whose authority? And let's talk jurisdictional issues. This is an outside force telling our people they can't walk across the bridge. By what right? Context of white supremacy. We will be picking up, if you can dig it, on chapter 1. So we have only read the author's note and the prologue. So when we start the second audio segment, we will start on chapter 1. But this would be the C.O.W.S. Context of White Supremacy. Gary Rivlin, Katrina, after the flood, our first session. Folks would like to participate. The number to dial, 641-715-3640. The code is 564943 pound. Press *6 if you would like to participate. That number again, 641-715-3640. That code again is 564943 pound. Press *6 if you would like to participate. For folks who would like to dial in, if you do not have a phone, you can use the free HD line. It should be linked at the Black Talk Radio Network. If you need the address, it is tiny, TINY.cc/1 race, and that is the number 1. So that address again is tiny, TINY.cc/1 race, and that is the number 1. When you put in that address, click the link on the left side of the page. It says free flash phone. When you click that link, it will open a small window on your screen. The first line, it's a drop-down menu. It will ask for the number. Click the number that I just gave out, which again is 641-715-3640. The next line, it will ask for the code, same code, 564943. And then the final line, it will ask for a name. You can put in a nickname, real name, press random keys, whatever you're comfortable with. Once you get all that done, click the green button at the bottom of the screen. It will connect you to the program, and you should be able to hear us. It is the same procedure. If you would like to participate, press *6. I'll see your hand. You'll see the dial pad on your screen to press *6. Once you do that, I'll see your hand. We'll get you on the line. This is a sizable book because it is not just dealing with that first week after the storm. It's going to give us the full what happened, what has transpired over the last decade. So I hope folks are interested in this topic. I certainly have been, but I hope folks are interested, and not just because, but because we can learn a lot, and just because I think this is one of the more important events that has transpired over the last, as I said, last 50 years. So definitely hope folks will be interested, alert, paying attention. Keep in mind we got a white reader, and looking forward to enjoying the read. We'll hit everybody who dialed in with their hand up. Line should be open. Feel free to chime in.
Yes, may I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings, Gus. Greetings to the other callers and listeners. I wanted to start out with, if the golden rule is to treat others as you would like to be treated, observed by many religions, then the religion of white supremacy golden rule has to be do unto others before they do unto you, or even think about doing unto you. And the first thing in this book that we have to deal with, it looks as though it was 200-300 people trying to cross this Crescent City bridge. And you flee in a flood. You know, I mean, it's life or death. You're trying to get to safety. And you got police officers and vigilantes or whatever, any white person that you can gather together with guns, shotguns, and they're turning you around. You know, this is something that wasn't really reported, that I didn't know about. But when we look into the fact that it happened on a Monday, and then we didn't hear any mention of the governor until around Thursday, and then a lot of blame was put on Ray Nagin, but it looks like Ray Nagin had been in touch with the governor before then. She just wasn't sending any buses. You know, the governor, when she finally did send National Guard, she didn't send them for humanitarian reasons. She sent them to protect property. There was no protocol for emergency evacuation. Some of the interesting observations that I had was, at first the author didn't let us know if these people were black or white. As far as like Wilford Eddington, I assumed he was black by the way that, you know, they treated him. But Lieutenant Reuben Stevens, you know, I assume he was black too by, you know, what happens later in the book. But I don't know if that was done intentionally. We didn't know that right off of the cuff. But then we did know that when they reached the bottom of the bridge, that the young female officer was a black female officer that was stopping the people and pretending, well, saying that the bridge was her bridge and that they couldn't cross. She had just been put there, you know, by others in charge, but still he made reference to the fact that she was black. And this guy, Chris Roberts, that showed up, a city councilman, you know, yelling at people. If you do some research, he was only about 28 years old at the time. And he had something to say about that incident later that was different than the accounts that the author made. But he acted, you know, out of his authority, stopping people. And I thought it was interesting that the A. Philip Randolph, who was a prominent African-American civil rights activist, the building was named after him, the headquarters, but it was also known as the barn, a place where, you know, we keep animals. But another interesting fact was the police officers that were with the group that were trying to flee the flood encountered opposition from other police officers, and the so-called blue-blooded code didn't apply to the black officers. And it seemed like it was a shock to Lieutenant Stevens on page 11. And this guy, ex-Marine Scott Vincent, on top of the bridge, it reminded me of the American sniper, Chris Kyle. And it seems he was rather happy of his accomplishments, which could have involved murdering some black people, saying that his job was to keep people from roaming around the city of Gretna. And the situation was so bad that it looks like black people were attempting to obtain help or to be granted passage to safety by having some white people within their ranks, because on page 18 with Bradshaw and Slosky, they grew as they went along, and probably because they thought that they would surely receive help if they were with some white tourists. And the poor black women in the wheelchairs, it didn't matter if the assistant director of the rail operation was with them. They didn't have ways to secure the wheelchair on the back of the truck. With the white officers, it didn't matter. Let's get that truck out of here. And we don't care if the old black women roll off the back of it. Let's get out of here. And with that, I'll mute my line. Give somebody else a chance. Thanks, Gus.
Other callers have commentary. Feel free.
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Well, just a little bit I've heard so far. These officials, every single one of them, including the governor, they should be arrested and tried for treason. The governor, especially, for issuing a kill order on civilians. That's Article 3, Section 3, for those that need to do their reading on treason. The officers, who I'm pretty sure had to swear an oath to protect even the Louisiana Constitution. I'm pretty sure it's going to have the same thing in that as well as the federal Constitution. These people, these racists, never, if a DA wanted to, he can easily make a case on all these people that had a gun on unarmed civilians. United States military personnel know. They know better. And yet they even did some incorrect things. But if they were in the military, they know that they would have never pointed a gun at civilians. Now, when they came in when the National Guard, I believe, came into, was it the National Guard? Or one of the battalions came in, and they were pointing the guns at civilians. The general had to tell them to put the guns down. Somebody told them to have guns locked and loaded in the first place. And that order had to come from somebody, because you're not coming to rescue somebody if you got guns locked and loaded. So I just want people to really think about that. Because when we go over here to these other countries and we're rescuing these other countries or whatever we're doing as United States personnel, I can guarantee you we don't have guns when we land on the shore. When Mount Puntubu over there in I can't pronounce it now, over there in the Philippines exploded. We went over there. We didn't have our guns on the people when we got off the boat. When the Marines got off the boat, when we brought the Marines to the shore to go help, Navy personnel went to go help. We didn't have our guns out, locked and loaded. But black people, well, they need to have guns on them. And that's why I say treason. So I'm going to sit back and listen to the rest. It's going to be hard. I know it's going to be hard for me to listen. But I'm going to sit back and listen to the rest and listen to everybody else's commentary. Right?
I just remind people that this case, the Crescent City Bridge incident, that this did go to court, and this was upheld as a just, correct thing to do, that there was no violation here, that this was a lawful act to close the bridge down, and the white people in charge said that they would do the same thing again, and the town even had a celebration to praise the white people for making this decision to shut down the Crescent City Bridge. But this did go to court. No foul, they would do it again. So folks should, I don't know if that gets, I haven't read this book before, so I don't know if that gets covered, but that should be a backdrop either way, whether it comes up in the book or not. The other folks who have not chimed in yet, did you all have commentary?
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good evening, guys. Good evening to all the other book club members. I was just stumped by the brilliance of powerful people in Washington saying, "Hey, let's just let New Orleans go. Let's not rebuild it. Why bother?" And that, I just thought that was so lacking in brilliance and so lacking in any concept of how humanity has worked to build societies on this planet for, maybe, who knows, 4 billion years. Someone in Washington, D.C. said, "Hey, why do we even really need a New Orleans? Let's let it go. Let's not build it. It's full of black people. Let's just let it go," with absolutely no understanding that you always have a city at the mouth of a major river. I mean, it is the best place, the best ground. It is the best place. You have the best soil. You have the most control. You have access to resources so easily. And someone was so stupid as to say, "Hey, let's just let it go. Why do we even need a city right there? It's just full of black people anyway. Let's let it go." And it's like, I mean, how stupid is that? I mean, who would even say anything like that out loud? I mean, the United States still builds their military up the Mississippi. I mean, their vessels. It's just such a stupid statement. And these are supposed to be powerful people in Washington, D.C., who are saying, "Oh, let's let that black city go at the mouth of the Mississippi. Who needs it?" And I thought that was phenomenally dumb. I bet they were serious, too. I don't think it was a joke. I think they were serious. Thank you.
Right on. Did we miss anybody? Anybody else have comments that they wanted to get in?
Have you heard?
You're a little low, Thomas, in New York. If you could speak up, please.
Can I be heard now?
That is better.
How are you guys this evening? Good evening to all the callers. I had a few observations to make, but I'll wait till the end of the second audio, man. This is going to be a tough one to listen to. I mean, it's sad already, and just hearing the details, just the attitude of these cops. It's just despicable, man. I agree with the caller who said, yeah, this is an act of treason. But I don't agree with, we sent troops somewhere and we did that. That's not us. You have to differentiate us from them. They sent the troops there. They could get people there. They could, and also this is their land as far as, they can protect it. They got the military. So they're not going into a foreign country. These are their niggers. They're going to treat it how they want to. But it's, I was thinking of the last, as you were doing the reading, and how the whole thing played out at the bridge. And we had back-to-back hurricanes. Well, one was a superstorm and a hurricane here in New York. I learned is that the white people, the wealthiest white people, live in a part of the town where they'll be underwater and out of electricity because it didn't affect us here. I'm talking about Manhattan, but uptown, we weren't affected either time. And we're way above sea level, down on this sea level. And I just imagine it playing out here where they're trying to get uptown. And imagine us standing at a court, not force. I mean, that's just never going to happen. The police will be on their side. Everything will play out different. Just listening to this and these stories, anytime these people say that they're ignorant, I mean, get out on television, it's the way that any of them is ignorant about the system and have state paid for and stop those people from crossing the safety. Nothing done. Nothing at all. I agree with the caller who said these people should be brought up on charges. You need to, they should go to jail for what they did. This is totally illegal, even by their laws, which is why, I say laws. Look forward to hearing the second audio. The first one, man, you can tell it's written by a white person because it's really, he's describing the scene, but it's no, Scotty Reed, it's no empathy. He doesn't empathize with these people. For the bus and members, it's not I just don't feel the empathy. He's being very detailed, though, in his writing and how he's describing the situation. But I don't feel the pain I think I would feel if a black author had wrote this book. And I'll move on. Thank you.
It was, your line broke up a little bit, but I was able to hear. I have headphones on, so I think I can hear a little bit better generally than people that if you're just listening on the phone or whatever. But I was able to I heard what you said in terms of, I think I heard everything where you were talking about how it was going to be difficult. You had some comments, but you were going to save until the end of the second. The comment that you ended with, I thought extremely profound in terms of the lack of empathy, and that if a black author had written this, you think it would sound different. It would be written with maybe more warmth, for a lack of a better word, or more of a sense of concern and care about the black victims in the book. The interesting thing, I've really just been gorging on Katrina material, which makes the book club much easier now. So I can relax and, already we have time set aside each week, so I can do that. But I read a little bit of Shots on the Bridge by Ronnie Green, who is also a white author, which is exclusively about the Danziger Bridge shooting that happened a few days after the levee failure in Katrina. And I had the exact same comment, that I think, in fact, I was prejudiced, right, when I went into the book because I heard him. He did a segment on Book TV last week, and it's available on C-SPAN. I think I posted it. And he said that he wanted to make sure, I'm assuming people listening to me know about the Danziger Bridge shooting, which is 10 years to the day. But he said that he wanted to write the book from a context where you could sympathize with the officers, where you could see how difficult the situation was for them. Some of them, their houses flooded. They had to be rescued. They were in these toxic flood waters. It was no leadership. They didn't have any food. They were having to loot to get water and food and supplies and what have you. It was just crazy. They were having such a difficult time themselves trying to function, and it was just such a wild time. So he says that at the beginning, and that right there told me everything I needed to know to have a white person say that. Why this is not written from the context of white supremacy or the context of NOPD being infamously corrupt. But that's something that I want people to kind of keep in mind throughout the book, that the fact that a white author put this book together. Even with that, though, as we keep that in mind, I also think, the length of this book, it is very detailed, and that's something I really appreciate, just having a lot of information. I think Thomas in New York said that it's very detailed in terms of the writing and what have you. And I would even have to say, I don't think there are very few times for books, films, television articles, the author's note when he starts, and we're going right into Alden McDonald. That's coming up in chapter 1. But when he talks about meeting Alden McDonald when he first came down to New Orleans, and he's just writing about this for the New York Times, and Alden McDonald, and he says that he's having none of this stuff about this is an equal opportunity storm. And he says sitting in the makeshift office his people had set up for him in the back of a bank branch in Baton Rouge, he drew a line down the middle of the map. He pointed out the western half of New Orleans. That's the New Orleans you know. He said the French Quarter, the Superdome, the Warehouse District, the Garden District, St. Charles Avenue. Then he pointed to the eastern half of the map. That's where he lived, McDonald said, and also most of his customers. Where you saw the water up to the rooftops, he said, that's where most of the city's black people lived. To get that kind of said at the very beginning as the author's note, I do think that's very important. I can't speak for the whole book, but I can say that I have heard a lot of Gary Rivlin over the last month. He's got a big media push, but that has been the central, that was kind of why I picked this book. That's been the central theme of what he has said. Now, we'll have to see if that holds up throughout the book, if he's honest about that, but that's been his central theme every time that I've heard him. Democracy Now! He also was on Book TV a week ago. He was talking about this book. He was on NPR, many other outlets. Is that everything about this event has played out with catastrophic impact for black people, and breaking down the details about what white people have done to make that so, and then in all areas of people activity. That's the whole reason for doing this text. But this is a white man, suspected race soldier, and definitely kudos to anybody who's picking out important details in terms of even if it's just, I think this would be different if a black person who was less confused about racism wrote this book. One of the other things I was and this I am reading the Kindle, so I am paying attention to what people highlight as we go. I'll make a note if I run across lines that people found very interesting. I would also encourage folks to get a map of New Orleans so that you can kind of see we can see what the city looks like, and it might even be good to get two maps so that you have one so you can see what the city looks like, and then have another one so that you can see what the flooding in the city looked like. I have one of those so that I can look at that. I actually made it my computer desktop background so that I can just pull it up at will because I'm doing so much reading on this right now, and it really makes it clear. They even have videos. It points, particularly if you get a map where it shows how deep the flooding was, depending on where you were. It is wow. Like the areas where the black people are, wow. I mean, they got hammered. When 15, 20 feet of water, sometimes they got hammered. And I mean, you can really see that drawn out on the map. You can also see where the Danziger Bridge is. You can also see where the Crescent City connection is, the bridge incident we're starting the book with. And in fact, if they had gotten across the Crescent City Bridge to the north of Gretna is Algiers Point, unless I'm way off, but I don't think I am on this one, is Algiers Point. That is where Donnell Harrington was shot at by white terrorists during the same period of time. So even if they had gotten across the bridge, the danger was still there. I wanted to ask, in reading this, I knew about the Crescent City Bridge incident. I thought that incident got talked about a lot. I thought that was an interesting starting point for him to begin the book right there. I mean, there's so many different events. There's so many different ways that he could have started the book. To start it there, I thought was interesting. For one, and let's see how I can do this. Anybody listening, was this the first time that you heard about the Crescent City Bridge and people being turned away at gunpoint? Was this the first time that anybody heard about this? If you could just say yes.
Yes, for me.
Okay, so one out of, it's 4 people participating right now. So one out of, I guess, the 5 of us total. That's what I thought that was a very...
Say that again, Gus.
Was this...
you kind of broke up.
Okay, I said, was this the first time that people learned about the Crescent City Bridge incident? Was this the first time that you heard about people being turned away on this bridge at gunpoint?
No.
Okay. Yeah, just so I'm assuming everybody else, this is their first time. The caller at 8179, you should be with us as well, 8179.
Good evening. I just wanted to say this was definitely my first time hearing about it. And I heard a lot about more of the so-called crimes that were happening at the, is it called the Silverdome?
Superdome.
Or the Superdome. Yeah, I mean, I heard so much footage on, you know, what was supposedly happening there, but I never heard about this. So this is interesting.
Okay. So that's 2 out of now. It's 6 of us. 2 out of 6. 33% people had not heard about this incident. Okay. That is interesting because I thought that this incident, I mean, there was a court case based on this. This did not just happen. This happened, and this did get talked about while all of this was going on because people blogged about it. Some major folks ended up hearing about this very early on and were talking about this incident. And there was some commentary back and forth. It's in Spike Lee's documentary where he even has some of the white people that were on the bridge talking about, you know, we try to get off and what they saw happen, and some of the other black people in New Orleans who, you know, heard about this incident and gave their thoughts on it. But that, number one, is telling, just the fact that, you know, this incident, I guess there were a lot of people who didn't know about it at all, much less the fact that it went to court and all that other stuff. I also thought it was interesting because that sets a very, that sets a tone for that's almost going back to what I said about Mr. McDonald and saying that this storm had a hugely disproportionate and catastrophic impact on black people. It is nonsense to talk about this. And this is excluding everything else that happened. If we were just talking about the levee failure and the storm, that had a disproportionate impact on black people. Like, I don't hear people saying that at all. And then that's almost like doubling down on it to say that, wow, we're really going to put, in my opinion, we're really going to put racism at the forefront of what this is about and how this event played out, to have to start with black people, black police officers, black civil servants being denied at gunpoint on a bridge. Now, you could say that he makes it a bit more nuanced, I think might be the word they would put on it, because you've got some black officers participating. But that's just, to me, that's just showcasing at the end of the day, it was white people who made this decision that the bridge is closed, those niggers are not coming over here, period. If now we have so much power, we can even hire some niggers to keep those other niggers off the bridge. That's how much power we have. But either way, those niggers are not coming over here, period. Unless I'm off, do other folks have other thoughts on that?
The only other point that I wanted to make is, if you look at the map, like you said, they have a map in the book. And from where the levee broke, it's just hard to assume that was just a coincidence that particular levee broke at that particular point that would flood out the lower Ninth Ward and the black area and not hit the St. Bernard Parish that much, and definitely not touch the French Quarters and the tourist area. And also that the governor was more concerned with the canceled airline flights than she was the black people that were in distress at that time. I'll mute my line.
With the levee situation, now that one, that's why I would encourage, and I could probably even help with this because I'm trying to do so much research on this, because I think all of this is so important and it reveals so much about the system. They had, unless I've been misinformed, it's reported that they had over 150 miles worth of levee breaches. It wasn't, it was all over. Like, they have maps where you can see where they had breaches at, and they did have a levee breach in Lakeview, which is a predominantly rich white area, and they did get hit with like pretty deep water, as deep as some of the stuff in some of the other areas that got hit pretty hard. I mean, there were breaches in many other places throughout the city than just the Ninth Ward. My opinion would be, if the people that say that they think this was an explosion, that it would either be to me, it doesn't seem feasible. If there are all of these breaches over the city, it doesn't seem feasible that they could have blown all of those. It would have been like the city was erupting. Everybody in the city would have said that they did this. So that doesn't seem feasible to me. But I have heard people suggest that they think this was done, that there was maybe an isolated explosion to make sure that the Ninth Ward got messed up, and then you had the other failures too. I've heard people suggest that, but there were a lot of levee failures throughout the city. At any rate, I don't want to get distracted on that too much. I'll be interested to see if that comes up in the book, but I don't want to get too distracted with the bomb aspect of it as we roll along. But since we're at the beginning, that definitely is legitimate, definitely correct to be brought up. Folks have other thoughts on him starting with the Crescent City Bridge incident, or anything else that you thought was significant and wanted to make sure we touched on it?
I have some more comments.
Mm-hmm.
My sisters, I didn't serve in the military, but my sisters served in the military, and they always came home with stories that, they were always looking for opportunities to test new weapons, because, just always whatever strange weapon they happen to have, whether it's, lighting or sound or whatever new weapon they happen to have, and they're always looking for opportunities to do that. Even in a make war situation, the most important thing is let's bring out the new weapons and see how they roll. Whether it's Panama or it's over in like Iraq or something. It's very vitally important. So, and I wonder with everyone being left for so long. And I know we're saying, well, it was not only, maybe it wasn't simply an absence of empathy. Maybe something else was being rolled out. Just maybe something else is being tested to see how that was. Because I never hear anyone talking about the new weapons a little bit, the new weapons that they use whenever they start a conflagration or anything. But maybe there was something else going on, and I'm hoping that maybe in this book he might mention something that he didn't appreciate at the time. But if we're thinking about it beforehand, there might be clues to say that, well, maybe this is a test of some kind, just to see if something else was, if this would work, how this would work in this situation, if that makes any sense.
I think he already gave one of those clues. I have suggested people look at this as a military operation. What happened, maybe even every aspect, even if you want to say that this was a detonation, hey, you can say the whole thing of it was a military operation. The second sentence in the book says, armed soldiers were stopping cars at roadblocks set up on the perimeter of the metro area. I had hitched a ride with Republican state senator anxious to get to her flooded home and her husband. My press credentials got us through one checkpoint. Her legislative ID convinced the National Guard to allow us to pass through another. In my opinion, that right there, that's the beginning of the book, tells me a lot about this city, and it's a lot of other information. I keep saying that consistently. That chunk of time from maybe September 6th through October 5th is real important, because it was pretty much, you could not be in, it was exactly what he just said there. Checkpoints, and even if you got press credentials, if you are an elected official, you might have difficulty getting into the city or getting into certain aspects of the city. And you had Blackwater and all these other armed personnel in the area. It is an just astronomical period of time to investigate. But I absolutely think this was a military campaign. That's the way we should read it. And very first paragraph in the book.
Okay.
I agree. It's sort of like an occupation and remove, and don't let them back in, and sort of also at the same time trap them in so they don't get out and affect any white people. What this really showed to me also is the ineffectiveness of black police officers, the the way that they think that there's some type of shield that they belong to, that they're going to be treated equal, and they're not doing, and they're not practicing racism with the rest of the whites. They're treated just like a nigger. And you saw that when they went over the bridge. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the other bridge had black cops with the white cops, the Danziger Bridge. I'm not sure if this bridge did, but these black cops leading these people over, and, you know, I'm sure pulled out their badge. Hey, I'm a cop. That meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing to the white people. And I just, you know, I don't see that why black people are always dedicated to that shield. What you mentioned about the blowing, I know you don't want to talk about it too much, but I think that the fact that the reason why there was so many breaches in those levees all around is because they knew exactly where that water was going to go. You know, it was like a puzzle. You know, if we blow this side, we blow that side, the water's going to have nowhere but to go in here. And if it meant a community or two of whites, elitists, you know, rich whites who lost some property, but, you know, of course they had the money to get their stuff rebuilt and probably not even be around for the actual storm coming in at all because they could afford to leave. I totally think that this was a operation to remove these people, and the storm was coming, and they knew exactly what walls to knock down to get the prime optimal effect of that storm. I mean, my line.
I have one more comment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they were testing new weapons. Like, I don't think it was the newest weapon. The one that they used in Boston was, can we shut down a major metropolitan area and hold it? Can we shut it down completely and hold it? And then they rolled that out in Boston again. So I think that was the military objective. Because I didn't see any new diseases roll out, just like the staph infection and stuff that people were getting, and that was pretty bad. They didn't report on that, and I didn't hear of any new weapons, you know. And I don't think that Katrina was artificially created because that's pretty normal. But I do think that it was the first time, I think, in really recent history that they've locked down a major American city and held it. I mean, and then the next time was, if I'm not incorrect, was
9/11
right?
was pretty locked down. A lot of places were locked down for 9/11, so that was 2001.
Maybe I guess.
I think New York was pretty much shut down. I don't think you could do too much in New York for a while, or Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I couldn't even get from New Jersey into New York for 9/11. And, I was in New York. The only way I could go to be safe was to get on a ferry back into New Jersey, and I couldn't even get back into the city.
Oh, we veered. We veered.
I know. I'm sorry about that. But it was locked down. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And, yeah, I think this was also a drill, like she said, to lock down the city. Very easy.
Yeah, they had one more piece just to that component. I mean, Democracy Now! Did a whole segment on this with Jeremy Shahill talking about this as a military operation, Blackwater being there, tons of armed white people controlling the city. They had a look and leave policy. This is Mayor Ray Nagin instituted this policy where this was like the latter part of and Hurricane Rita came through too, so that prompted another evacuation because it wasn't safe because it was another hurricane, and I think they did get a little bit of flooding on top of that. But it was, you could come in and look at your property, but you had to leave. So just real important. But this is I'm reading the Kindle, so I don't know the pages exactly, but the group ran into National Guardsmen. This is the group as they're trying to get to the Crescent City Bridge. The group ran into National Guardsmen a few streets from the Montleone. They were no longer letting people inside the convention center. The soldiers told them, but didn't have an answer when people asked where they should go. The guards told us that was our problem, and no, they didn't have any extra water. I mean, to me, that does not sound in any way like we are here to help. We're here to assist you. This sounds just like total military operation. We're here to keep the convention center shut down. Nobody else is allowed here, and I'm not even sure if the people that were inside, if they were allowed to leave freely because Gavin S. Johnson, he wrote the book about being trapped at Orleans Parish Prison. He said that when you got to the airport, it was locked down. He said that you could not really just go run willy-nilly around at that point. He said it was like a checkpoint set up not that far from Louis Armstrong Airport, and that it was you had to have some form of, hey, this is where I'm trying to go. Another checkpoint set up the other block. You might get past it, you might not. Total military operation, in my opinion.
I've done hurricanes. I've done hurricanes since then. They weren't like this. I mean, the National Guard was there. Everybody had guns, and you need to be when the sun goes down. All y'all need to be someplace. But it wasn't like what I'm reading. It wasn't like no water for you, no food for you. We're just here to make sure that you don't move. That's not how it was. The National Guard was there, but that's just to make sure the stores didn't get people didn't lose their property. But they also directed you to places where you can go and get food and shelter and stuff. But these places where the diamonds are, you guys have to be off the street by dark. But it wasn't like this.
We have about 8 minutes. Anybody else have comments they want to get in? Anything else stood out in the segment that we've read so far?
Hey, Gus, I wanted to ask if anybody else noticed. It seems as though the author took his time to tell us about DeVille's his medical condition. He's 58 years old. He's got a bad heart. He's taking medicine for cut on his leg and all this stuff. You know what I mean? When you got children and old women and people with the same medical problems, that he's got, they're suffering, but he's not mentioning anything about that, but he goes into detail of this guy's condition.
DeVille is a white person?
That's what I'm saying. I'm assuming that it is because of the way that he's writing the book. I don't know for sure. But it was confusing at first who was black and who was white. But it seems like he says that when he wants you to know and then avoids it when it's not convenient.
I was saying as I was reading this, I wish they had pictures next to the name so I could know, is this a black person? Is this a white person? Because that's, really, really vital information. Sometimes he does say it, as you said, sometimes he does say, but sometimes he doesn't. And that is critical information. I really wish they had that, but that'll be something to kind of keep an eye on as we go, paying attention to whom identifying the white people, identifying the non-white people, identifying the black people. With DeVille, and that leg injury, I was just the thought that came to my mind, and this is just from some of the other stuff and knowing that this is toxic sludge, was, man, is he going to have to get that leg amputated? That was the thought that came to my mind. People were getting really sick from being in that toxic sludge, trying to get to safety.
Yeah, it was kind of out of character that he would go along anyway. I think he was the general manager. And, someone had to stay back. But then it looked like everybody wanted to go. So, and the majority of the group was black, he said.
Right.
But he said it was mixed. So there were some people other than black people, whether they were white or not.
Right.
We don't know yet up to this point.
Yeah, it'll be good to pay attention as we go along to kind of keep track of that, whom the white people are, whom the black people are, and kind of how this shakes out with some of this. Folks have any other comments they want to make sure they got in before we get to the second audio? buses, I thought that was important too. Buses didn't respond. I said that the other day. Those lies and that nonsense about raping babies and a hostage takeover at the children's center and all this other, prisoners broke out and stole all these guns, that cost black lives. And I think that could have been a part of the military campaign to put out a lot of disinformation. And that makes it even better if you already know, well, we're not going to help them. We're going to, maybe we'll give them about a week and just see how this goes. But if you know you're going to do that up front, well, then we justify it. This way we won't catch as much flack because it'll be, well, hey, they're animals anyway. Look at them. They're raping babies and looting and, everything else that we're lying and saying that they're doing. It's just a whole military package put together. But I thought that was very important. Buses not going in to help black people because of this nonsense. And the people in Gretna, they also justified their behavior by saying that some quote-unquote looters had gotten out and got into Tarrytown and broke into a store and robbed and set a fire intentionally and some other things. So they used that as a part of their justification for why this was necessary. But that was, whatever. Other comments? Anybody have anything else they want to get in? All right, I assume folks.
What was the significance of the governor's husband coming down there? I didn't quite get it. Was he there for a photo op or something?
It might have been. It could have been that, he knew people in the areas, a lot of white people that live around New Orleans. Even in New Orleans, they have a significant population of white people. He might have been coming down to try to help out some of his homies. It could have been a photo op. Who knows? To come down to do, thinking he was going to be able to do whatever he could. Certainly would have looked good for Governor Blanco at the time. I think she was on television quite a bit. I did want to make sure I got that in. I've seen quite a bit of her footage of her on television and out doing stuff throughout the week. She was not, at least talking, she was not obviously generating any resources for black people, but I did see her out communicating quite a bit. She was giving, I think, like up-to-dates, minute-to-minute updates on the Superdome as the roof started to be snatched off and the water was leaking down in the Superdome. And she certainly, I think, infamously gave her commentary. I think it was September 2nd, which would have been 4 days after the storm, about the officers can shoot and kill. Anything else folks wanted to get in?
I think Bill DeVille was a black man because I looked him up, and the general manager of the RTA there at New Orleans, looked like a light-skinned black person.
Oh, all right. That is good to know. Good to know. Good to know. I guess we can do that as well as we go along. We can be looking up, folks. This is new. This is not 19th century. This is brand new. So a lot of these people probably got Facebook pages and Twitter accounts and all that stuff. Anything else folks want to make sure they get in? I can pitch my book club really quick. This is auxiliary book club since I'm gorging on Katrina material right now. I just finished Shots on the Bridge yesterday. So I'm looking to read a new book in addition to this one. This new book, this would not be on the program. This would just be something that me and some of the other people on my Facebook page are interested in reading. We're going to vote, pick a book, and just read it, and then we can share commentary on Facebook or wherever as we read the book. But this would not be on the air. The choices, there were 5 choices. One of the books is 5 Days at Memorial, which is, we already had mention of Memorial Hospital. That book is about the white doctors at Memorial Hospital. They decided to kill the patients that they thought either would not survive because they had been without power for 5 days, and they thought that these patients were too weak, or it would be too difficult to evacuate them, and they wouldn't survive once everybody left, so they killed them. They administered lethal doses of various chemicals, and they died. I think it was like 20 people. There was a case. It was a black DA who brought this case. This was very unpopular that they were going after these doctors and medical staff, but that's one, 5 days at Memorial. The other one is Zaytoon. I think that's how you say it, Zaytoon. This is a non-black, non-white male. He was a Louisiana resident. He had a canoe. Storm, levee failure. He goes out and is reportedly he saved a lot of people. Logic would dictate he saved a lot of black people. Enforcement officers detain him, arrest him. They accuse him of being a terrorist. He ends up being in confinement for like a long time under suspicion of being a terrorist. These are my top two choices that I would like to read as a part of the auxiliary. 5 Days at Memorial, Zaytoon. The other choices include Douglas Brinkley's The Deluge, John Barry's The Great Flood of 1927, which is also about New Orleans major flood. That was done deliberately. Like, this is no debate. White people deliberately destroyed these levees to flood one area and save powerful white people's property in New Orleans. No debate. This happened, documented. But that's John Barry's book, The Great Flood of 1927. And the other one is Wendell Pierce, The Wind in the Reeds. Wendell Pierce, New Orleans resident, property owner on Lake Pontchartrain. So those are the 5 books. My top 2 choices are 5 Days at Memorial and Zaytoon. Full disclosure, most of these books are very, very long. Like, whoa. I think minimum 800 pages, and I think some of them are significantly longer than that, like 1,000 pages or more. Significantly longer than what we would do on a book club. But I think right now there's one vote for 5 Days at Memorial, and there's one vote for Zaytoon. So if you are interested in just reading it, we would probably pick out a moderate rate per week, and we would just, write our thoughts online. You would be very informed, because then you have more material as we go through this book. You'll be very informed about the storm. But if you would be interested in doing that, drop me a line, let me know. I'm trying to get started ASAP so we can start reading over the weekend and sharing ideas. But that's just auxiliary. Right on. We will go ahead and get to the second audio segment. We are starting on Chapter 1. Very easy if you're reading along. Chapter 1. Gary Rivlin, racist suspect. His book, Katrina, After the Flood, Context of White Supremacy, audio segment number 2. Chapter 1. The Banker. The plan was to evacuate vertically. That's what the uptown Blue Bloods did when a hurricane took aim at New Orleans. And so too would Alden J. McDonald Jr., president of the city's largest black-owned bank. With Katrina bearing down on the region, McDonald had his assistant book a block of rooms at the Hyatt in the city's central business district. That's where the mayor would hide out the hurricane and where Entergy, the local electric and gas utility, was setting up its emergency center. The Hyatt, a 32-story fortress made from steel and cement, was wrapped in fortified glass. Rising high above its next-door neighbor, the Superdome, just off Podres Street, the hotel had its own generator and would be stocked with extra provisions. Theoretically, it promised its guests a safe berth above the chaos. McDonald woke up early in his home on that last Sunday in August 2005. He had slept maybe 3 or 4 hours. The National Hurricane Center categorizes every storm based mainly on the strength of its winds. When McDonald and his wife, Ressa, had gone to bed on Saturday night, the center had rated Katrina a powerful Category 3. By early the next morning, the storm had been upgraded to Category 5. There is no Category 6. The 61-year-old bank president drank his coffee and readied himself for his day while a radio blared dire warnings. A lifelong New Orleanian, McDonald knew hurricanes could be fickle brutes. They shift in direction without warning. Their winds pick up speed or deflate in strength depending on the warmth of the waters over which they pass, among other factors. But as of Sunday morning, the radio was reporting that Katrina was a Category 5 storm expected to hit the New Orleans region within the next 12 to 24 hours. Scientists warned its winds could top 175 miles per hour. The storm surge, a giant tidal wave essentially, might reach 25 feet. This storm looked like the big one that experts had been warning about for years. Home for McDonald was out in the east, more formally New Orleans East, swampland that had decades earlier been drained and converted into a series of subdivisions housing a large portion of the city's African-American middle class, along with a large share of its black elites. McDonald was the son of a waiter whose annual wages had never topped $15,000. McDonald now lived on a quarter-acre in Lake Forest Estates, one of the pricier enclaves in the sprawling appendage to New Orleans, whose 96,000-plus residents represented around one-fifth of New Orleans' population. His bank, Liberty Bank and Trust, had financed a sizable share of the homes and businesses in the East. Its headquarters were located in New Orleans East, as was its computer center and storage facility. The majority of the bank's employees lived in the East as well. A little past 8 a.m., McDonald slipped behind the wheel of his red BMW convertible. Only later would McDonald understand this drive around New Orleans East as a kind of farewell to his home of more than 30 years. "These are my people," McDonald would say of the residents of New Orleans East after Mayor Ray Nagin, a month after Katrina, appointed him to a Blue Ribbon Commission charged with determining which portions of drowned-out New Orleans should be rebuilt and which parts might more wisely be returned to marshland in a city certain to lose residents. These were my neighbors. McDonald had been 29 years old and a college dropout when in 1972, Liberty opened in a trailer in a sketchy part of town. 33 years later, with a massive storm gathering over the Gulf of Mexico, McDonald was readying for yet another storm. At that point, Liberty ranked 6th on a list of the country's largest black-owned banks. The air already felt oppressive, heavy with humidity. The car radio blared ominous warnings about the potential for calamitous flooding that could damage half the city's homes and leave New Orleans without power for weeks. McDonald's first stop was Liberty's headquarters, a rectangular-shaped 6-story glass box gleaming in the morning sun with Liberty spelled out in large white letters across its top. This building, only a few minutes from McDonald's house, was so new that not every department had yet moved over from the old headquarters on the opposite side of the I-10, the freeway that bisected the east. A few days earlier, the bank had taken delivery on a new mainframe computer that had cost around $500,000. Brand new desktop computers matched the new furnishings. He parked his car and walked around the building, giving each door a tug to make sure it was locked. Inside was a man the bank had hired to ride out the storm. Accompanied by a pair of dogs and outfitted with several days of food and water, he would serve as a last line of defense against looters. The percussive sound of nails pounding through plywood accompanied McDonald's pre-storm tour. Everywhere he looked, people were boarding up windows and loading cars. Despite the dour newscast, his spirits were lifted by the sight of so many of his neighbors taking warnings about the storm so seriously. He crossed to the opposite side of the I-10, parked in front of one of his bank branches, and again jumped out of his car. Standing just under 6 feet tall, McDonald is a courtly, light-skinned black man with a doughy face, wavy white hair, and matching mustache. Peering through the glass, he saw that his branch managers had placed Saturday's deposits on top of the filing cabinets, exactly as he had asked them to do. Next, McDonald visited the low-slung bunker next door, the old headquarters his people were vacating. The building housed the mainframe they were using to run the bank until the new machine could be brought online. Most of the bank's records were stored there as well. McDonald was frugal and sometimes questioned the wisdom of writing a $5,000 check each month to a Philadelphia area disaster relief company that promised to keep his bank online if ever his central computers went down. Now the decision seemed wise. As he had done in advance of past storms, he had his people make 4 backup tapes of the bank's computer files so they had up-to-date depositor records. One he sent to a branch in Baton Rouge, another he sent to a Jackson branch. The other 2 were with a pair of bank employees who had evacuated the area. Let people make fun, but a cautious streak had him creating backup plans for his backup plans. Without those tapes, he said, I'm dead in the water. McDonald's wife, Raisha, was also out of the house early Sunday morning. She had wanted to leave town rather than ride out the storm at the Hyatt, but her husband and their 24-year-old son, Todd, who worked for the bank as a loan officer, outvoted her. Her job was to pick up her parents on Park Island, a small genteel community of good-sized houses on the Bayou St. John, closer to the center of town. Her father was 82 years old, and her mother only a few years younger. Raisha was an only child. Her parents would go wherever she was. Raisha McDonald's husband was a big deal in New Orleans. He had had his picture taken with every president stretching back to Ronald Reagan and had met a pope. He was one of the few African Americans who had ever been honored with what the city's once daily newspaper, the Times-Picayune, called its Loving Cup, a Person of the Year award given to someone in honor of his or her public service. But Raisha's father, Rivas Ortique Jr., represented black royalty in New Orleans. Ortique, a civil rights attorney, had been the first African-American justice to serve on the Louisiana Supreme Court. Whereas Alden McDonald had shaken hands with presidents, Ortique had been named to 5 presidential commissions, including the Commission on Campus Unrest that Richard Nixon had created after protesters were gunned down at Kent State and Jackson State universities. As president of the National Bar Association, an organization of African American lawyers, he had sat with Lyndon Johnson in the Oval Office, where he pressed the president to name more black attorneys to the federal bench. Several months later, Johnson appointed Thurgood Marshall to the U.S. Supreme Court. Raisha crossed the short bridge that brought visitors to Park Island and pulled into the driveway of the home her parents owned directly across the street from Ray Nagin's. 30 minutes later, she was at the Hyatt. The time was 9 a.m. At the front desk, Raisha picked up the keys to 4 rooms to accommodate not only themselves, but Todd and their 30-year-old daughter, Heidi. Raisha helped set up her parents in their room on the 23rd floor before entering the room she reserved for herself and her husband. 30 minutes later, she was knocking on the door of her parents' room. "We're leaving," she announced. She knew they would put up an argument, but on TV, they were warning of mass blackouts. The image of her parents walking down 23 flights of stairs made her stand her ground. "You can't check out. You just checked in," the clerk said when Raisha reappeared at the front desk. "Oh, yes, I can," she responded. She phoned her husband. "I'm picking you up wherever you are. You're getting in the car and we're leaving town." after 31 years of marriage, her husband knew better than to argue. Besides, the car radio continued to impress upon him the might of Katrina. The line that stuck with him was the one broadcasters kept repeating. Only 3 Category 5 hurricanes have hit the continental United States in recorded history. Talk of flooding caused the McDonalds to take several extra precautions before leaving town. McDonald drove one of their cars, a gold-colored Lexus sedan, to Liberty's headquarters, where the bank had a 2-story parking structure. McDonald parked the car on the 2nd floor, where the Lexus would at least be above the flood line if the streets filled with water. He locked the sports car he had been driving in the garage of his house. That at least would protect it from the falling debris and hide it from potential looters. At 10 a.m. on Sunday, as the McDonalds were preparing to take off, Mayor Ray Nagin declared a mandatory evacuation, the first in New Orleans history. McDonald got behind the wheel of Raja's dark blue Lexus and pointed the car east. Heidi and her dog pulled in behind them, followed by Todd and a friend. The McDonalds had just said goodbye to house guests, a couple visiting from Atlanta who had cut their trip short because of the storm. "Come stay with us," the couple had suggested. They were both physicians in Atlanta with a home large enough to accommodate a crowd. So with Revis and Miriam Ortique in the back seat, Alden and Raja McDonald headed to Atlanta, followed by 2 of their 3 children. Normally, the drive from New Orleans to Atlanta takes around 6 hours. That Saturday, the McDonalds were on the road for twice that long, and they might be counted among the luckier ones. Ward Mac McClendon made the same trip from the lower 9th Ward several hours after the McDonalds. McClendon, who would eventually sacrifice everything in his fight to save the lower 9th, was already playing hero, rounding up a couple of his neighbors he knew had no other way out of town. McClendon was hoping to make the Atlanta home of his eldest daughter, but gave up past midnight when they were still in East Central Alabama. They were in the town of Opelika, in a cheap motel whose name none of them can remember. McClendon and the others would learn about the fate of New Orleans while watching a small television someone had set up in the corner of the lobby. Safe in Atlanta, McDonald flopped on his friend's couch, watching the increasingly bleak storm coverage on a big flat-screen TV. The first burst of news out of New Orleans on Monday morning had left him breathing easier. As advertised, Katrina was on par with a Camille or a Betsy, a hurricane people would be talking about for decades to come. But the storm had jogged in the middle of the night. The destruction in towns such as Biloxi, Gulfport, and Bay Street, St. Louis along the Mississippi Gulf Coast dominated the news that Monday, not New Orleans. A 28-foot tidal wave had destroyed properties along the 100 miles stretching from western Alabama to the southeastern corner of lower Louisiana. Where once thriving communities had dotted the coast, the TV cameras found little beyond empty foundations, broken off pipes, and brick stairs leading to nowhere. I can only imagine that this is what Hiroshima looked like 60 years ago, Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour said after taking an aerial tour of the devastation. By the time the storm reached New Orleans, Katrina's winds were blowing at 125 miles per hour, making it a Category 3 storm. To the extent newscasters talked about New Orleans on Monday, they all seemed to repeat the same cliché. New Orleans seemed to have dodged a bullet. For years to come, people would speak about the collapse of the New Orleans levee system as if it happened 24 hours after Katrina made landfall in Louisiana. That's how the president and his top aides saw it even weeks after Katrina. It's a mistake people make still today. But the city's 911 operators knew better. Early on Monday morning, the city's emergency switchboard was deluged with calls from frantic residents. At first, almost all the requests for help were from the lower Ninth Ward, but soon dispatchers were hearing from other parts of the city. Later, the LSU Hurricane Center figured out that the first few levee breaches occurred at around 5 a.m. on Monday. It just took time for the wider world to catch up to what was happening in New Orleans. The city's flood protection system had been devastated. One major breach was along the Industrial Canal, a man-made waterway that separates the lower Ninth Ward and also New Orleans East from the rest of New Orleans. The storm surge spilled over the top of the flood wall protecting the lower Ninth, creating a trench so deep that by 7:30 a.m., 2 segments of the wall had collapsed. The propulsive force of the water pushed homes off foundations and devastated the northwestern edge of the lower Ninth, closest to the breach. Other sections of the city flooded not because of breaches in the outer flood protection system, but due to failures in drainage canals the city used to collect water after a heavy rain. Giant electric motors in 24 pumping stations around New Orleans sop up excess rains and dump it into Lake Pontchartrain via one of 3 major canals that the Corps of Engineers had rebuilt in the 1970s. There were major breaches in 2 of these 3 canals, the 17th Street and London Avenue canals, and more flooding because a section of a levee along the 3rd, the Orleans Avenue Canal, had never been completed. The brackish waters of Lake Pontchartrain, the country's 2nd largest saltwater lake, flowed into Lakeview, a prosperous white enclave on one side of City Park, and Gentilly, a mostly black middle and working class community, on the other. There were dozens more breaches in the New Orleans flood protection system that proved fatal in a city that geographically resembled nothing so much as a giant bowl that sits 50% below sea level. By the time the lake and the city reached equilibrium, 80% of the city was covered in water. Television couldn't get enough of the images of devastation and despair once its producers learned of the flooding late Monday or early Tuesday morning. Sitting in Atlanta, Alden McDonald remembers seeing those first images out of New Orleans of people stranded on rooftops and on elevated highways and on small strips of high ground, of entire neighborhoods underwater. No one was talking about New Orleans East, but the longer McDonald watched, the more certain he felt he was doomed. He had loaned tens of millions of dollars out to homeowners and entrepreneurs in the East, and now their properties were probably lying under 4 to 6 feet of water, unless it was under 8 to 10 feet. The only thing I could think of is all of these people lost their real estate, which I had as collateral, McDonald said. He began tallying up what else had probably been destroyed, starting with the bank's paper files. Most of the bank's essential documents, the deeds for houses, the titles for cars, were still at the old headquarters and would be underwater. Sitting in his friend's home, he wondered if his bank's days as an independent institution were over. "I'm wiped out," McDonald told himself. McDonald could have called 100 people to commiserate. On his BlackBerry, he had the private numbers of fellow bank presidents and a long list of elected officials. He had close friends he had known since childhood. Yet he kept redialing Russell Labb, a Liberty employee whose tenure dated back to when McDonald's office was a small room with cheap paneling in a trailer. Labb, who grew up on the edge of a bayou, had been piloting boats since he was a child. He had also worked as a general contractor prior to taking a job as a kind of Mr. Fix-It, jack of all trades at Liberty in the 1970s. Labb had celebrated his 70th birthday shortly before Katrina. but he was a sturdy man who stood 6 feet 2 inches tall. He was calling me every hour, Lab said of McDonald. In McDonald's memory, it was probably more like every half hour. Sometimes McDonald was phoning to talk through strategies for getting into the city. Other times it was to ask Lab what he might have heard about specific neighborhoods since they had last spoken. Mainly, it felt good, McDonald acknowledged, to talk solutions rather than to stare helplessly at the television. They spoke countless more times over the coming weeks, especially while water still covered much of the city. I must have taken 15 boat trips in, Lab said. It was always something that had to be done right away, because that's Alden. If he needs it now. McDonald was eager to get back to New Orleans. If not the city itself, then at least Baton Rouge, which was 70 miles to the northwest and a lot closer than Atlanta to his drowned-out life. If anything were to happen to their New Orleans operations, the bank's doomsday plan called for key bank personnel to rendezvous in Baton Rouge, where the bank operated 3 branches. They operated another 2 in Jackson, Mississippi, 180 miles due north of New Orleans. On Wednesday, with barely more than the clothes on his back, McDonald flew from Atlanta to Baton Rouge. Fortunately, he said, I took 4 pairs of underwear. Finding a hotel room in Baton Rouge was impossible. For those first few days he was in town, McDonald couch surfed. Even when Providence delivered a house in Baton Rouge to use indefinitely, the well-connected bank president continued to live like a much younger version of himself. This house that in normal times might comfortably have slept 5 or 6 more resembled a youth hostel during the summer high season. Several people from the bank, including his son Todd, took up more or less full-time residence there. And what was he supposed to do when someone, such as Ronnie Burns, an old family friend, who also sat on the Liberty Board of Directors, called to say he needed to be in Baton Rouge for a few nights? People were sleeping on floor space wherever they could find it, Burns reported. There must have been like 20 people staying there. At least McDonald usually managed to keep a bedroom for himself. Everyone called it the Southern Branch, this Liberty outpost in Baton Rouge, across the street from Southern University, a historically black college that sits along the banks of the Mississippi. The branch wasn't much to look at, a tan brick building with a corrugated tin roof damaged in one corner. McDonald even had considered tearing it down and rebuilding something nicer, but this functional facility had a set of back offices that would serve as a temporary command center. Long before Katrina, McDonald had thought to install extra T1 lines and store extra phones and other backup equipment on site. For the foreseeable future, this modest-sized branch housing a single ATM machine would serve as headquarters for a bank with $350 million in assets and 35,000 customers. McDonald could list 100 things he needed to do to save Liberty, and then another 100 things after that. But nothing preoccupied his attention like his lack of a centralized computer. Tuesday came and went, and still the disaster backup firm had not received a backup tape. No package arrived on Wednesday or Thursday either. Liberty owned 2 mainframe computers, yet one was underwater and the other was useless in a city without electricity. Until the computer tapes showed up in Philadelphia, no interbank networks such as Star or Plus could monitor how much money a Liberty customer had in his or her account. The satellite imagery the cable networks broadcast in the hours before Katrina made landfall showed a giant white pinwheel of angry clouds stretching some 500 miles across. That was McDonald's mistake. he had not counted on the storm's vastness. Airports across the Southwest were affected by Katrina, and packages were stacking up in Memphis, where FedEx had its main hub. Both packages McDonald had sent for overnight delivery were being stored somewhere on the grounds of FedEx's sprawling facility. McDonald spent upwards of $15,000 to charter a plane to ferry someone first to Memphis and then to Philadelphia, once he had located one of the missing tapes. Yet that wasn't enough. On Friday, McDonald's IT chief broke the bad news. The backup firm needed more from the bank before Liberty could be back on the interbank network. Worse, what was needed was inside the bank's New Orleans headquarters. McDonald could only laugh over the tens of thousands of dollars he had paid to the recovery company throughout the years. It was that or cry, he said. Did a customer who had temporarily relocated to Tallahassee, Florida, have the money to cover the $300 she was requesting from the ATM? Who could say until the bank was back on the interbank network? Russell Labb didn't flinch when McDonald asked him to go into New Orleans and pick up what they needed. I knew this had to happen or we had no bank, Labb said. Discretion dictated they wait for the authorities to empty New Orleans of most of those trapped there. On Saturday, Labb decided he would head into the city early Sunday morning. He would bring a gun, he said, because you'd be crazy to go into that scene without one. When you have a hurricane like this, they'll steal your boat. They'll steal your truck. People will shoot you. What a way to end Chapter 1. We will be back next week at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll be picking up on Chapter 2. If you would like to participate, feel free to chime in. The number 641-715-3640. The code is 564-943#. Press star 6 if you would like to participate. I'm very excited about the auxiliary book club. I'm just calling it that for the time being. I gave the books before, the 5 books. They're on my Facebook page. I'll even repost that so people can let me know if you would be interested in reading. It would not be on the program, and just writing, email, Facebook, a thought or two as we read the book. Let me know. Those are the 5 on the table. If there's another book, Katrina related, that you would like to read, you can put your vote in. Right now there's votes for... There's 1 vote for 5 Days at Memorial and 1 vote for Zaytoon. We get at least 1 more person that will break the tie. We'll have the book and we can start. I would like to start immediately. So you can email me today or put it on the Facebook. I'll repost the title so you can check them out and let me know. Hopefully we'll get at least 1 person to join the auxiliary book club group, and we can rock and roll. Folks who have comments who would like to share, feel free. Everyone who dialed in with a hand up, your line should be open.
Gonna be heard?
Yes, sir.
The last guy, the banker, what is it? What was his name?
Alden McDonald.
McDonald. Okay, the McDonald guy. He wanted to go out with a gun, and he seems to think somebody would take his stuff.
Well, that wasn't McDonald. That wasn't McDonald who was going in with the gun. That was Russell Labb. He works for McDonald. He was going in with the gun.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, either that guy would think somebody's going to take something from him, and I don't know if I haven't heard of anybody who got robbed like that during that whole thing going down. We heard rumors. But I think he might be talking mainly about white people who would do something like that. Black people already showed you what they were about. When it hits the fan, they turn around and help each other and help people. I haven't seen too many or even heard of too many white people really doing the deed that they need to do, except for those that are of Coast Guard. There's very few that stood up and did what they need to do. And that is very difficult to understand, you know. I'll let somebody else talk until I think of something else.
Oh, I did want to. St. Bernard's Parish, they did get pretty significant flooding in St. Bernard's Parish. They have video on YouTube. I mean, like, excuse me, when I say significant, like more than 10 feet of water in some areas. Like St. Bernard's Parish did get hit pretty hard. But I said this before, I don't have any sympathy for St. Bernard's Parish because they got to rebuild. We talked about that when we had Anitra Brown on the program this past week, the New Orleans Tribune. Not only did they get to rebuild, there was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit where they put in racist codes to keep black people from buying property there. So I certainly don't have a lot of sympathy for whatever happened to the white people in St. Bernard's Parish, but they did get hit pretty hard. Did other folks have commentary that they wanted to share?
Yes, may I be heard?
Yes, sir, Mr. Demery Ford.
Okay, yes, that was very interesting. McDonald, you know, and he's trying to save his bank. You know, when you think about that the author would choose this particular person, because when you think of black people suffering throughout the Katrina flood, you think of poor blacks. But now you got this millionaire, and think of everything that he's got to lose here. And then we're right in the middle of it. And Lab, you know, his faithful friend goes in to see if he can get this one vital thing that he needs to save the bank. That's good stuff right there. I just do a thumbs up on this part of the story. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Appreciate that. Folks have other comments they wanted to share on the second audio segment? I thought Thomas in New York City was going to share second audio. I mean, maybe folks, I don't know if people are in spots that maybe can't talk right now. Did 9451, did you have a comment you wanted to share? Let's see if I got
Probably heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Demery. That was, very good that he put that in there. What stood out for me was his man sending $5,000 a month to this Philadelphia firm to back up his child. Here this guy owned a small black bank in a very poor black city. And come to find out, man, they don't even have it backed up. Just reckless regard for black people, if you ask me. If it was big black or big white kids, all this stuff would have been backed up with no problem. And here this guy is just trying to stay afloat He's already counting on, looking at the areas where he's loaned money to black people for houses and to build businesses. And he's seeing that they're all underwater, and he's counting his losses. And here at least he was smart enough not to trust, even that those white people he's paying $5,000 a month to. And he sent some files to Jackson and to another branch in Baton Rouge, but just reckless regard for these people that do actually their assets. It's like it didn't matter. I'll mute my line.
Can I hear? I want to mention something about that. I'm pretty sure he had some form of insurance on that, whatever loan that he dished out. I'm pretty sure he had some insurance on the houses that his so-called client may not have had. I'm sure he was smart enough to have some form of insurance placed in his. And I didn't understand. They had to go and get some physical equipment so that they can have their records moved to another location. And I'm thinking to myself, how old is their system? I thought that all the banks had a central hookup, and pretty much it's over the phone, and it's always updated. But I guess not. They got to go and physically take some equipment and verify how much money they got in the bank, or who is who, and what is what. You would think with the world that we have and the communications that we have, the communications that we had back then, you should be able to dial up and dump that information wherever you are over the phone. But that is interesting. If they're like that, then there's still some people or some banks that are still operating like that, like maybe these credit unions. So that's something to take into account when people want to so-called get prepared for such disasters. I'm still in the mode of, I don't know how you're going to prepare for a 20-foot wall of water. And in some cases, it's going to be 10 feet above your house. I don't know how you're going to prepare for that, other than move out of that area.
Yeah, that is one thing I would, at least the research that I have seen, and I don't even live in the state of Louisiana, but the research that I've seen, there are still issues with the levees. In fact, the information that I saw, portions of those levees are sinking, and they have, I think, until like 2025 to correct the problem, or it voids the federal insurance, according to reports I've read, to get that done. Meaning, if there should be a flood of some sort, then they will not be reimbursed, since they know that this problem exists and they have a timetable to fix it. In addition to, I think the city is still sinking and the sea levels are reportedly rising. So, there are still major concerns by all accounts, or by many accounts. There are still major concerns that, this could happen again, or something even worse. Anybody that we missed who wanted to share, who had a hand up? Anybody?
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say that, the way this is being presented is kind of the way I saw it. I watched it, almost from beginning to end, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing, hearing all these reports, the Category 5, and it was almost as though nobody really truly believed it was going to hit. And then when it got closer, they said, we're going to put people in the Superdome. I said, well, do they know that can withstand a hurricane? And it was just the most horrific tragedy that I think didn't have to happen. Even when they were evacuating people, they had one side of the highway, I guess the southbound, empty. There was no one that could say we're closing this off to southbound traffic. Everybody is going north and getting out of here. Those kinds of things. And I don't know that those problems are fixed. It's like, like the kind of white people I work with, they will sweep something under the rug until they have to face it, because they're trying to save their budget or trying to get a promotion or something. And as you said, Gus, with New Orleans sinking, well, the same thing's happening with the Central Valley in California. They recently wrote a report. They said it's dropped 10 feet, and there's levees all around that protecting it too. But nobody seems to be in a rush to do anything about it. They just, every now and then, you'll see a little mention of it in the media somewhere. But it's almost like, back Y2K. Remember that was supposed to be a disaster, but at the last minute, everybody got everything together. But what had happened was they knew that problem was sitting there and waiting for the year 2000, and nobody wanted to spend the money to fix it. They kept pushing it, to the next, whoever came in my institution anyway. So, and lucky me, I walk in there right in the middle of all this mess, and because we had to redo all these computer systems to be able to function after January 1.
Kind of veered off a little bit.
Yeah, but I was just saying that what I'm trying to say is that I don't think it's uncommon, and I kind of expect that, another major disaster, there are going to be these gaps in coverage because I don't think they really plan for it. They pretend, but they don't really plan for it. So I don't know what an individual can do, but, that to me, that's one of the reasons things didn't go well. There was just nobody that was willing to step up and say, at least get the people out. They had all those buses sitting there with keys in them. Nobody to drive them, that kind of thing. And anyway, the way this book is moving so far, that's the drama that I remember when Hurricane Katrina hit. So that's all I had to say.
For sure. Did you know about the Crescent City bridge incident?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was watching all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I saw that, and they didn't do anything about it. They ran those people there. I can't remember where I was reading the report, but I don't even think I had Twitter then to even talk to really anybody. Just basically email, maybe Facebook, but yeah.
Right.
But that they got away with it. I just wondered, was this part of that master plan that they made when they had that big meeting that Ray Nagin was talking about?
Yeah, I think, I guess we'll see in the book in terms of how he describes how things came. That's supposed to be the whole crux of the book. Again, this is not really focused as much on the first week. He's given a lot of good detail to start it off, but the bulk of the book is supposed to deal with, all the stuff that happened after the flood, as the book is titled. Did we miss anybody? I think we got everybody who had a hand up. Did we miss anybody?
Well, I just have one more comment. Just one more. All of this, I'm really realizing just how you are not supposed to leave. You just aren't. I'm looking at the infrastructure on cities and towns and everything, and I did live in New Orleans, and I have lived in a lot of different places, and black people are not meant to move freely about the country. And that is, I'm just thinking that's just a leading cause of our inability to weather any kind of storm or natural disaster or catastrophe, because everything has been designed beforehand so that we cannot get off of that plantation if we need to. There's no road leading out for us. But see, now I can't say that, because the hurricane right after Katrina was Rita, when everyone tried to get out of Houston, lest the government try to help them, that was a catastrophe. So maybe it's not just black people. Maybe no one is meant to move freely about the country, except the military, of course.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of, in New Orleans, and I think just period in the system of white supremacy, you have a lot of black people, a lot of non-white people in total, who just don't have the resources to adequately evacuate. And white people knew this. Like, they had a report in 2002 in the Times-Picayune. It was on the front page that predicted this exactly, that there's a large population of people who don't have vehicles or are elderly or have mental problems or disabled, children, impoverished, that, whatever, depend on public transportation, that, would be stuck, and they would be stuck. I mean, everything that happened was predicted. They knew that this was, multiple white people, they knew that this was going to happen. That's why I say, for me, it is really, if they bombed them, if they didn't do it, it's the same thing. That they knew that this sort of thing was likely to happen. They knew that those levees were faulty and were in danger of failing. They knew that if that happened, there could be catastrophic flooding, catastrophic loss of life. They knew all of this in advance, and there was no plan to take care of these black people. City with a huge population, literally hundreds of thousands of black people prior to Katrina. Number one, the chapter ended, I thought it was so significant, because, I mean, that's profound. Sometimes for people who read a book, you might stop. This might be where you stop at, and you might not pick this book up for another day. So that's like the lasting thought that you have. This black person going in to defend a black bank, no less, and I got to be armed. I don't think the typical person reading that would be thinking that I got to be armed because the cops that were out on Danziger Bridge might get me. The cops that shot Danny Brumfield might get me. The cops that shot Henry Glover might get me. At least 10 black people got shot by, or at least 10 people, period, most of them black, by NOPD officers during the first week of Katrina, and who knows, over the first month after the storm. That's not what you would have in your mind. Or the white people that weren't even enforcement officers in Algiers Point that shot Donnell Harrington. That, I don't think most people would be thinking, oh my God, it's tons of armed white people that are looking to kill black people. I got to be careful. I don't think most people would think that. They would be thinking, oh, it's those black people. Oh, it's those looters that you got. And I'm not even saying that, black people were perfect and there was no crime or anything like that. I'm just saying that I think it was in my view, it was criminal, the false information that was given out at that time that justified not helping black people, and the fact that it was woefully and remains woefully underreported. This is the 10th anniversary of the Danziger Bridge shooting, and this is not trending on Twitter. People are not going crazy. I don't even think it got that much attention during the Katrina 10. Robin Green got attention talking about his book, but I didn't really see people making a big deal out of that. And, what a disgrace that this happened, and then they overturned the charge. But at any rate, I also I really appreciate, because I had never heard of Alden McDonald and a black bank in New Orleans. I mean, that's great black self-respect. I'd never heard of him, but there was a slight wince at having a white person being the author, writing about this. One of those, I don't know how this would sound, maybe if it was a black person who really cared about and was less confused about racism, cared about black people. Some of the other things that I thought were really important, I think it could be another aspect of disinformation, because I think this also cost black people's lives. They said that by the time the storm reached New Orleans, Katrina's winds were blowing at 125 miles per hour, making it a Category 3 storm. To the extent newscasters talked about New Orleans on Monday, they all seemed to repeat the same cliche. New Orleans seemed to have dodged a bullet. Those levee failures and or detonation, if that's what you think happened, took place early Monday morning, by some reports before the sun even rose Sunday morning. And he said in the book that there were 911 calls flooding them. That, oh my God, this is a catastrophe. And they're breaking down in tears because they know these people are going to die. Just to have massive failure on both ends, that you fail to get out to the world immediately that this is a catastrophic problem. You give out false information there, and then you compound that by giving out all these false rumors about lootings and hijackings and all this other stuff that didn't, raping babies and raping people and slashed throats in the Superdome that did not happen. I mean, it's just, in my view, I think that could totally be a part of the military operation, just false information all the way through. I've also thought anyone who thinks this was a detonation, of course, where he says, at first, almost all the requests for help were from the lower Ninth Ward, but soon dispatches were hearing from other parts of the city. Of course, it begins where the black people live. Of course. Let's see, what else did I have that I thought was, let's see. Yeah, that they got incorrect information, that was pretty widespread on Monday. This sounds like a codified black person. Alden McDonald, he sounds codified, like he parks his car on the second story just in case there is some flooding. He has backups of his backups. I mean, this sounds like, hey, I don't think you would be a successful black bank owner in a system of white supremacy without having some form of codification, and he sounds extremely codified. Let's see. I thought this was important because I think Karma had said after the first audio segment, she said that about the white people in Washington, D.C. who were saying, let's not rebuild New Orleans. That was a pretty common sentiment among many people, even in New Orleans. And even if they weren't saying, let's not rebuild New Orleans, it was, we certainly are not going to rebuild all of New Orleans. Like, that was very common. And he brought that out in the book when they were talking. I mean, they had a lot of meetings. They were I think they were calling them green spaces at the time. And they had huge chunks, lots of New Orleans East and areas in the Ninth Ward. Just, it's, wasteland, niggers were there. We're done with all that. That was a very, very common sentiment in the weeks, not even in the weeks, in the days, really, in the hours following the storm and the breach. That was very, very common. We have about 3 minutes left. Book club. I'm posting it on Facebook now. If folks are interested, if you would be interested in reading one of the 5, let me know. People who listen to the archives and what have you. This is not on the program. This would just be write something on Facebook or a message or what have you, and share ideas as we read. Any other comments folks wanted to get in about what we heard?
I wanted to say one. Oh, go ahead, ma'am.
Just technical question. Okay, believe it or not, I don't do Facebook. I'm trying to remember now. Where is C.O.W.S on Facebook?
Well, this is on my page, but it's also on the Facebook page for the C.O.W.S, one of them, which is facebook.com/RWSWJ. And you'll see the posts. You don't have to join Facebook or anything. You can read it.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Demery Ford, did you have a comment?
Yes. It was about McDonald, and one of the callers previously was saying that he was probably covered, insurance. But if you think about the magnitude of the fact that he had all this money, and they mentioned that they had drained that marshland and then built a subdivision there. So if all of that is underwater now, I mean, insurance will not give you the exact value of what was lost. So it was still going to be a tremendous loss. I mute my line.
The insurance companies were I'm hoping, because he has been talking about that, the insurance companies came up on, they had like historic profits after Katrina largely because they did not give black people a dime for damages. A lot of white people did not get anything from insurance companies either, but there were a lot of black people who did not get anything for their property being destroyed. Just everything, losing absolutely everything. Anybody else have anything they want to get in before we wrap up? I will assume folks are satisfied. We're starting next week on Chapter 2. I am very excited to read the book. He covers the charter school situation, the destruction of public housing. We get to hear how Mr. McDonald's story plays out. It's it's while I'm going to see. She might not, have the time to invest, but I'm going to at least see if Miss Brown with the New Orleans Tribune, if she might be willing to hang out for a session, because Mr. Rivlin used some of their research for his book. And she, talked about it on the program. They have a review of the book to get her to sit in, just because, she lived through all this and knows it well, to just add her perspective as we go throughout. I might ask her and see if she's down to participate. But I'm excited. I'm reposting what I said about the books on the Facebook page right now. So if you are listening, you can just go to my Facebook page. I'm also going to put it on the C.O.W.S group page. As I said, we already have one vote for 5 Days at Memorial, and we have one vote for Zaytoon. So we need at least one person. You can break the vote and pick a book that we can read. Pick a book that we can read, and hopefully we can get started like within the next 24 hours. So it's on my Facebook page and the C.O.W.S group. If you have any other questions, confusion, suggestions, feel free. My email, untiljustice@gmail.com. Again, untiljustice@gmail.com. On Twitter as well, @untiljustice, @untiljustice. Almost done our fundraiser for the summer of 2015. Invest if you think the program is constructive. Racism-notes.blogspot.com. Listener supported, counter racist radio. Address again, racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal, top right corner. For the folks who are not into PayPal, feel free, drop us an email. We will get you a physical mailing address. Thanks to all the folks for tuning in. I did not want to read another book. I was, it's time consuming. It takes a lot longer to read a book out loud than to read it silently. It's time consuming. I was really hoping to just get an audio book and do it that way, but there is no audio book for this one. So I hope folks can tolerate Gus narrating once again, and hope it's more work on me than it is for you. I'm sure that I am a lot more disgruntled when I have to read than folks who have to listen, because I have to listen to it too. Anywho, we'll be back next week for this, and we'll be here tomorrow for the compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Looking forward to reviewing what transpired over the last week, as well as workplace racism. Should be lots to talk about. Looking forward to it. Kim Davis. We'll be looking forward to hearing from folks tomorrow. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Looking forward. I hope folks will be dedicated and hanging in. This is a longer book, so we'll be on this for a while, but I think it's super important, and I think we'll all be able to learn a lot about what transpired. I think this is probably one of the most important events that transpired in our lives over the last, as I said, half century. Gotta be, in my opinion. Anywho, thanks again, and we will be back tomorrow, about 24 hours. No alcohol in the presence of white people. You don't want to consume any alcohol with white people. You don't want to be around any white people who are drinking. It is a horrible combination. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. If you're going to drive, certainly no alcohol. Even be careful if you're going to be a pedestrian or a passenger. Race soldiers, they look for any and all reasons to just molest and cause us unnecessary problems. Even be mindful about the non-white people that you're around if they are under the influence. Buckle up if you are going to be in the vehicle. That's another easy one. Just do everything we can to minimize conflict with enforcement officers. Minimize, minimize, minimize. With that, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible. Context of White Supremacy signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.